Weekends meant bikes with my best friend Emily. We made little loops around our Oregon neighborhood and timed the hills. That Saturday in late fall, the air smelled like wet leaves and metal. I rolled from my driveway, shifted wrong, and the chain snapped. It slapped my ankle and dropped in a greasy loop on the pavement. The back wheel spun with no pull. I stood there, 1 foot down, looking at the mess. I called Emily and told her. She did not laugh. She said her little brother's bike was my size and I could borrow it. Her house was on the other side of Meadowbrook Park, 20 minutes if I cut through. I looked at the sky. The sun slid behind the dark firs. Days were short. I grabbed my jacket from the hook, told my mom I was going to Emily's, and started walking. Streetlights buzzed on. I pushed my broken bike to the park gate and locked it to the chain link with my small cable. The green path inside was smooth and familiar. It ran past empty baseball fields and into a tight group of trees. A drinking fountain dripped. A jogger went by with headphones and did not look at me. Fallen leaves stuck to my shoes. On the right, the playground sat quiet, bright plastic gone dull in the dusk. Swings moved once and settled. The bathrooms were closed, metal doors rolled down with scuffed graffiti. A dog barked twice, then it was quiet again. Wind pushed leaves along the curb like small cards. The path opened at the pond. Ducks cut thin lines on the dark water. A single lamp on a pole threw a round light onto the trail. I pulled my zipper up. I had walked this path a lot, but the early dark pressed in. Houses on the far side of the park glowed with living room lights. I came out by the picnic shelter and took the side trail to Emily's street. I checked my phone. It was just past 5. I texted her that I was almost there. A trash can had a cracked lid and a coffee cup balanced on top. A motion light clicked on as I turned into her driveway. Emily opened the door before I knocked. The house had warm heater air and a faint laundry smell. She waved me in and led me to the garage. Her little brother's bike leaned by the washer. It was blue and clean. The seat looked right. I lifted it and spun the pedals. We went to the kitchen. I drank a glass of water at the sink. The window over the sink looked past their yard to the edge of the park. There were kid stickers on the frame. I set the cup down and wiped my hand on a dish towel. That's when I saw him. A man stood by the playground through the trees. Dark jacket, jeans, hands in his pockets. About halfway through the park earlier, I had felt like someone matched my footsteps. I turned once and saw nobody close. Now, seeing him near the empty swings, that feeling came back. The playground had no kids at that hour. No team practice, no birthday. He was not moving much. He was just there. Emily leaned beside me and looked out too. We watched for a few seconds. He shifted his weight and stared toward the slides. No stroller, no dog, no phone light. The jacket was zipped all the way. It did not look like waiting. Emily said we should check if he needed help. Maybe he was lost. Maybe his car died by the lot. It sounded reasonable. Her parents liked when we were helpful. We put on our shoes and went out the side door. The yard felt colder than the kitchen. Wet grass made a slick sound under our sneakers. The gate opened to a small trail that cut to the playground. We walked at a normal speed. When we were close enough to talk without yelling, Emily raised her hand and said, "Sir, do you need help?" I said, "Are you looking for someone?" He turned fast. Not friendly. A quick pivot like he was caught. His shoulders were tight. He did not answer. He looked at our faces for half a second, then stepped off the mulch border and headed for the trees behind the playground. His shoes made no sound on the packed dirt. His hands stayed in his pockets. He walked straight into the dark line of trunks. We stopped. There was no reason to follow him into the woods. I watched his back vanish between the trees. The swings creaked once and went still. Cold air touched my ears. Emily looked at me and then at the trees again. She said, "That was weird. Quiet." We turned around and went back. Inside, the kitchen lights were bright. The glass left a ring on the counter. We went to the living room. Her parents were on the couch with the volume low. We stood there until they looked up. Emily told them about the man by the playground. Dark jacket. No answer. He went into the woods when we asked if he needed help. I said I felt like someone walked behind me on the way over, maybe in the middle of the park. It could be nothing, but I wanted them to know. Her dad looked toward the back window and then at the TV. He said the park always had people cutting through at dusk. People took the trail from the bus stop. People smoked near the creek. He told us not to go into the woods after dark and left it there. Her mom paused the show and watched our faces for a second. She said it was probably fine, that we read too many mystery books, and that we were starting to see suspicious people everywhere. We hung out for about an hour. We ate pretzels at the counter and scrolled on our phones. Her brother did homework on the table and kept asking if I wanted the bike now or later. The man by the playground didn't come up again. The kitchen got brighter as it got darker outside. At around 6, I said I should head home so I could fix my chain in the morning. Emily walked me to the garage. I raised the seat on her little brother's bike and checked the brakes. They felt firm. I told her I would text when I got home. I rolled the bike down the driveway and cut back toward the park path. The air had that wet bite that sinks in after sunset. The trail lamp near the pond buzzed. I kept to the middle of the path and listened to the tires humming. Leaves crunched under them in little bursts. I relaxed. The playground on my right was empty. The swings were still. I saw an elderly couple with a small dog on the loop by the fields. The dog wore a blinking collar. The couple nodded at me. A family with 2 kids in puffy jackets passed by on scooters. The kids clattered over a crack and laughed. I kept moving. My neighborhood exit was ahead, through 2 curves and a short straight next to a big oak. I felt okay again. I reached down once to adjust my shoelace. The wind made a steady, soft sound in the tall firs. I could smell wet dirt. I was about to leave the path when my skin pulled tight between my shoulders. I turned and looked back down the trail one more time, quick, just to check. He was there. Same dark jacket, same jeans. He stood half behind the oak, one shoulder against the bark, his head tilted like he was lining up a picture. His face was shadowed, but his eyes were on me. We locked eyes. He moved the second that happened. He stepped out from behind the trunk with a jerk and started walking at me. Not casual, not slow, just direct. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I spun the bike toward the exit and pushed. The front tire skidded on leaves and then caught. I looked back once. He had sped up. The walk became a jog in 2 strides. He dipped his head and drove forward with his arms tight to his sides. He was older than my dad, maybe, somewhere around 50, but he covered ground fast. His shoes hit hard. I could hear them now, quick thumps that got closer. He yelled something. It broke over the path and lost shape in the trees. It sounded low, like a grown man's voice, sharp and angry. I couldn't make out words. It could have been swearing. It could have been stop. It didn't matter. I kept pushing the bike. Riding would be faster, but the first push didn't swing me up clean and the seat knocked my leg. The trail bent left toward the exit. I followed the curve. The lights past the gate flicked in my eyes like a target. I ran harder. My breath burned cold. The handlebars knocked my hip with each step. The pedals spun and clipped my ankles. I heard his feet again, a pattern that didn't fade. He was still coming. I didn't look back. The gate was 10 steps, then 5. I burst out onto the sidewalk by the streetlights and the strip of grass between the road and the park fence. I swung the bike side to side and got it rolling faster. Cars hummed on the cross street. Porch lights were on. A mailbox had Halloween stickers peeling off it. When I dared to look back, I saw him at the edge of the park. He had stopped at the line where the trail met the sidewalk. He stood there like someone hit pause. His shoulders rose and fell. His face was turned the same way as before, eyes tracking. He didn't step out into the open. He watched me. I kept going toward the houses. I cut across the corner yard rather than follow the walkway. I didn't stop. I reached my driveway and ran up it with the bike banging my thigh. My keys felt huge and slippery. The porch light made a bright circle that showed every scratch in the paint on our door. I dug in my pocket and dropped the key ring once and grabbed it again. I got the right one in the lock. I turned, pushed the door, and slipped inside with the bike and my backpack on my shoulder. I kicked the door shut and turned the deadbolt. My breath was loud in the small entry. I took out my phone and called Emily. I told her what happened in simple words because that was all I had left. She said I should tell my parents and call the police right away. I walked into the living room where my parents were. I told them I needed to call the police. My mom muted the TV without asking questions. I dialed. The dispatcher took my name and age and asked for the location. I gave Meadowbrook Park, the oak by the exit near our street. I said dark jacket, jeans, male, around 50, medium build, fast, shouting. She asked if he touched me. I said no. She asked if I could describe his face. I said the lighting was bad, but he had short hair, maybe gray at the sides. I couldn't say more. She told me officers would patrol the area and took down a phone number. She said to stay inside and lock the doors. I was already doing that. My dad put the borrowed bike in the hallway and checked the front window. He stood there for a minute and then stepped back. My mom asked me to repeat everything again. Slow. For them. I kept it basic. I didn't add extra even when my mind wanted to. She wrote the time on a notepad and the words, dark jacket, like the dispatcher had. She asked if I wanted tea. I shook my head. I texted Emily that I called. The house felt smaller with all the doors locked. I went to my room and plugged in my phone and stared at the blank wall for a minute. I kept thinking of the thump of his shoes and the way he froze at the edge of the light. I pulled my curtains closed. I could still hear the normal night outside. A heater kicked on. A car drove by and slowed near the corner. Later that evening, my dad came down the hall with his phone in his hand. He said our neighborhood forum had a thread. 3 other people had called the police about a suspicious man in Meadowbrook Park. One report was from a mom who said he stood near the swings and watched kids and didn't talk to anyone. Another was from a high school girl who said a man tried to talk to her near the creek but she ran. Someone else saw him by the baseball nets 2 nights in a row. People were arguing in the comments about whether to go as a group to confront him. Someone else posted the non-emergency number again. We called the department back to add that others were reporting the same man. An officer said they were already aware and had a car circling. There wasn't much they could do without a name or a clearer description. My parents didn't like that answer, but it was the same one I got. We checked our locks again. We left the porch light on. That night, I lay in bed and kept my shoes by the door. I didn't sleep right away. I listened for things that weren't really there and watched my door frame. Nothing happened. No car pulled into our driveway. No knock. In the morning, my dad drove with me to return the bike. We went the long way around on the streets and skipped the park. Emily's mom met us at the door and asked if we were okay. We said yes and kept it short. The man was never found. For a while, cruisers parked by the park entrance near dinner time. I saw them on the way to school. Rumors went up and down about who he might be. Nothing ever came out solid. The police said to call if we saw anything again. We didn't. I still don't know what he wanted or what would have happened if I had hesitated when I saw him by the oak. I changed my route after that. I never walked through that park alone again, especially not after dark. This happened 12 years ago in Detroit, when I was 25 and tending bar downtown. Between shifts, I used the city bus because parking ate half my tips. Afternoons were quiet. The bus smelled like bleach and vinyl. I liked the dead hours because nobody sat close and I could zone out. That day, I sat by the middle doors and watched Jefferson roll by. At the third stop, a guy in his 30s climbed on and scanned the aisle like he was shopping. The bus was almost empty. A mother with a stroller, a college kid, a man in a work vest asleep at the back. Plenty of space. Still, he came straight to me and dropped into the seat, touching mine, thigh to thigh. He didn't ask. He spread out, knees wide, then stared at my face like he was trying to place me. He started coughing. Not a little throat clear. Full, wet hacks. He covered his mouth, then wiped his palm on his jeans. After that, he turned to me with the same hand out. "Name's Rob," he said. His hand was shiny with spit. I lifted my elbow and tapped it against his knuckles instead. Clumsy. He went still, smiled too long, then put his wet hand on his own chest like I'd insulted him. Right away, he went personal. "Where do you work? Which bar? Do you make good money there? Do you have roommates? Do you live near here or farther east?" It came fast, like a script. His eyes didn't match the smile. They kept dropping to my backpack, then my watch, then the little clip where my bus pass sat. I gave short answers. "Downtown. Depends on the night. I'm fine." I turned to the window and let the city smear by. He switched tactics. He said he'd been laid off, said the boss had it out for him, said he hadn't eaten since morning. He sighed loud enough for the driver to hear. Then he asked if I could spare cash for food and dropped a number fast. Even 20 helps. It didn't sound like a sandwich ask. His shoes were spotless and his nails were clean. Something about the whole thing felt practiced. I told him I didn't carry cash during shifts because I had to register it. He watched my mouth and nodded slow. "Man, that's rough." Then he turned his body so his shoulder blocked the aisle. I could smell sharp cologne under the cough. He stared ahead, waiting for the bus to hit another red light. His story didn't stay straight. He said construction, then warehousing, then security. He said his landlord kicked him out, but his hoodie looked new and his jeans still had creases from the store. The watch didn't fit the picture. Heavy, polished. When I stayed quiet, he sat like we were two friends on a normal ride. His knee kept bumping mine in a slow rhythm that felt intentional. When I didn't bite, he dropped the nice act. He nodded at the pass clipped near my pocket. "If you're really out of cash," he said, "let me hold your pass for the month." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. "It's no big thing," he added. "You can walk or whatever. Share the love, right?" I'd bought that pass 2 days earlier after counting rent and groceries to the dollar. "No," I said. "I need it." He leaned closer until his jacket brushed my arm. His breath smelled like mints and old cigarettes. In a low voice, he said, "I always get what I want, one way or another." The words came out easy, like he'd used them before. His eyes were flat now. I felt the other passengers watching without trying to show it. The driver checked the mirror and looked back to the road. No one stepped in. People don't want extra problems. I kept my hands on my knees and kept my voice plain. Not happening, I said. He clicked his tongue and stared at the pass again. The bus slowed. The next stop had a shelter and a crowd waiting. Across the boulevard, another bus was rolling toward the opposite side. When the doors hissed open, everything got noisy. Feet on the steps. Someone arguing about transfers. I unhooked my pass and slipped it deeper into my pocket. Then I stood like I was making room. The crowd pressed in, and he had to shift his knees to let a woman pass. For a second, his shoulder left the aisle. I slid behind the stroller, stepped onto the curb, and moved with the bodies boarding. I didn't run. Running makes a scene. I stepped to the right, cut behind the shelter, and checked the light. The other bus's number matched a route I knew that would take me 2 stops down into a loop. I crossed with office workers and a teenager carrying a pizza box. The air outside felt colder than inside. Behind me, his voice got louder, muffled by the noise, like he just realized I was gone. He tried to follow. I saw him squeeze toward the middle door, pushing around people climbing on with bags and a folded scooter. A taller man stepped sideways and blocked him without looking. The mother swung the stroller wider than she needed to, eating another second. The driver said, "Make room," in that tired way drivers do. The guy kept frowning at me through the glass, one hand on the pole. I stepped onto the other bus. My pass scanned with a beep. Through the window, I saw him drift to the front doors, then back to the middle. People were a wall now. He wasn't fighting them, just pressing, trying to find a gap. The driver on my bus glanced at the mirrors, closed them, and pulled away from the curb. The doors closed before he could get off, and I thought that was the end of it. Several months passed since the bus, and work stayed busy. I ate lunch alone at a small cafe near work. I picked the window table so I could watch outside. The place was narrow, chalkboard menu, and loud espresso noise. It was a gray afternoon and traffic moved in sheets. My burger sat on a metal tray beside my water. I was halfway done when I saw him on Jefferson. He leaned into a man, blocking him, talking with hands. He turned his head, and our eyes met through glass. That same smile slid across his face like a trick. He tapped 2 fingers on the window and walked inside. He moved like he owned the room, no rush, confident. He scanned once, came straight over, and stood by me. "Well, well, well, that burger looks good," he said quietly. "Remember me," he said. "I always get what I want." He looked cleaner than before, new jacket and pressed jeans. He put his hand on the empty chair like property. He did not sit, just leaned toward my water glass. He told me to slide the tray over to him. "Not money today," he said. "Just your lunch, hot now." He waited, smiling, while I chewed and looked past him. The cook called an order and plates clinked behind us. I kept my face blank, swallowed, and set it down. I bet he would not make a scene with cameras. I ate slow to stretch time and test his patience. I wiped my hands and took another small drink slowly. He talked like we were friends, steady stream, no breath. The server watched us in the mirror of the window. I cut the burger into quarters and ate deliberate bites. He clicked his tongue and stared at the door outside. He pointed his chin at a woman hauling shopping bags. His eyes left me for a second, and then settled. He leaned close again and gave me that last line. "We will definitely run into each other again," he said. He turned away and walked out scanning, hunting the sidewalk. I stayed still until the door settled and bells stopped. I waited 5 minutes and watched his reflection in chrome. When I was sure, I cleared the tray and stood. Outside, cold air bit hard and traffic noise filled everything. I blended into a knot of office workers crossing together. I kept my head down and stayed in the middle. They carried me past corner and toward the subway stairs. I took steps and waited on the platform for trains. Light bloomed in the tunnel and wind pushed at coats. I rode 2 stops and doubled back on foot quietly. I cut through a parking structure and then a lobby. After that, I kept to main streets for a while. He looked polished to be hungry or desperate or homeless. New coat, clean shave, watch catching light time he moved. He had ditched sympathy games and now did straight pressure. I took different routes for a week and stayed alert. I told the cook I might start taking later lunches. I moved my bus pass clip to a deeper pocket. I carried cash small and kept cards separate in socks. Looking back, he was not a usual hustler with lines. He felt unstable, steady in his way, fixed on control. He used patience like tool and watched faces for leverage. I wrote his description on a receipt and kept it. Jacket, jeans, sneakers, scar on knuckle, mint breath over cigarettes. I kept it folded in my wallet for a month. Nothing happened that week. Then the next week was quiet. I relaxed a little but still watched doors and mirrors. I chose window seats and kept a clear path out. I avoided empty rooms and stayed visible when possible outside. The cafe crowd changed and winter light got thin and... Days stacked and nothing happened with him around the block. I figured he would drift to another corner and mark. I never saw him again after the cafe day ended. Still, his smile through that window shows up in memory. It arrives uninvited when glass reflects and I am eating. Back then my budget was tight and choices were narrow. I thought risks were fine for a pass or lunch. That was the math, and I stuck to it then. Public places and strangers probably kept him from escalating further. He reminded me of a bully. Nothing new, just pressure. No big motive beyond winning the moment and taking things. The scary part was not loud threats, but patient stalking. He remembered my face for months and looked for me. He returned to my block and watched the doorways there. That takes time, planning, and a certain kind of calm. It suggested someone not desperate, just practiced and comfortable pushing. I adjusted routines and kept an exit near me always. I told myself to stay boring and avoid private confrontations. I kept my phone charged and numbers written on paper. I watched mirrors, windows, and shadows sliding on floors inside. I parked near lights and left fast when shifts ended. I started finishing meals and moving before the crowd thinned. I changed nothing dramatic, just small habits that added margins. Years went by and Detroit changed in familiar ways again. The bar closed and I took work at another place. I moved apartments and cut my commute down by bus. Most days I forget him entirely and life stays quiet. Sometimes I see a reflection and check twice without thinking. The body learns and repeats whatever kept trouble away before. There is no big meaning here, just a clear memory. He used public space like a hunting ground, and simple. A few people around me set small barriers without speaking. That helped more than any speech or dramatic move would. I still wonder how many he targeted the same way. I still watch my exits and finish my meals faster. When I was 43, I thought my life was over after Robert filed for divorce. He moved out in a week and went straight to Brittany from his law firm, this 28-year-old with shiny hair and a loud laugh. I worked nights as a nurse at the hospital, but the apartment felt too quiet in the mornings. I started going to Iron Palace on Main Street because I needed somewhere to be where the lights were bright and the music was louder than my thoughts. My trainer was Kyle. Mid-20s, easy smile, strong arms. He watched my form and never made me feel stupid. He had the kind of attention that sticks. He remembered my schedule. He timed my rest without checking the clock. When I came in after a long shift, red-eyed, he said, "You're here. Good." He didn't say it like a compliment. It sounded like approval. I liked that. He teased me about counting reps under my breath. He handed me chalk when my grip slipped. Small things. I noticed the way other women looked at him, then looked at me, then looked away. I told myself I didn't care. Maybe I did, but action was easier than feelings. I had no idea he was Sarah's son. Sarah, my best friend from nursing school, a woman I'd known for 15 years. She'd told me ages ago her son trained clients around town, but Kyle used his father's last name, so I never made the connection. Every time she talked about him, she used baby pictures and old stories. The man in front of me didn't fit the child in those photos. He had a different jaw, a different way of moving. It didn't even cross my mind. I didn't ask questions. I liked the hour where I didn't have to be anyone's wife or nurse. After one session, he walked me to my car because the sun had dipped and the lot felt empty. He leaned on my door and said I was strong for someone who said she hates deadlifts. I laughed. It sounded like someone else's laugh. He kept standing too close, and I kept letting him. I should have asked more about his family, about everything really. But I didn't. I was tired of being the serious one. The hospital is fluorescent lights, clipped voices, alarms. The gym smelled like rubber mats and clean sweat. He made me feel seen. I pretended that was enough. His flirting started small. A longer look. His hand on my waist to correct form, fingers warm through fabric. He texted me appointment reminders, then a joke about my socks, then a picture of his new sneakers. I told myself it was professional. It wasn't. He asked what music I liked, then cued it for our hour. He said he liked the way I focused. "Most people break first set," he said. "You don't." It felt like oxygen. I let his words plant roots. If there were warnings, I didn't read them. I just kept showing up, early, without missing once. In August, after a session that left my legs shaking, he asked if I wanted to see his new place at Sunset Gardens. He said he needed help lifting a box, said he had a bottle of wine he didn't want to waste. I knew it was crossing a line. I still followed him in my scrubs, hair in a tired bun. Sunset Gardens was a squat complex with beige siding and a broken exit sign. He buzzed me in, took the stairs two at a time. Inside, he had a gray couch, a TV on a low stand, 2 stools at a small counter, and no pictures on the walls. We drank red wine out of heavy glasses that didn't match. He put on music low so the neighbors wouldn't complain. We talked about everything except the obvious age gap. I told him about the freezer at work that always frosted over. He told me about a client who tried to pay him with a treadmill. He didn't ask about Robert. I didn't say Brittany's name. When he leaned in and kissed me, I didn't pull away. It happened like turning a page. No speech. No plan. His hands were careful at first, then not. My hands shook, but not from the weights. That night started a secret routine. Twice a week after our sessions, I showered at the gym and drove to Sunset Gardens with my hair damp under a cap. I parked away from his building. I kept my head down in the stairwell. He met me at the door in a plain t-shirt, always fresh, always smiling like it was only us in the world. It felt simple. I needed simple. I told no one. I set alarms on my phone labeled with random letters so I wouldn't fall asleep there. I put my wedding photos in a box and moved the box to my closet. I bought him things I shouldn't have. An $800 watch that looked heavy on his wrist. A leather jacket that squeaked a little when he moved his arms. I paid his phone bill twice when he said the app glitched. He didn't ask for the watch. He tried to refuse the jacket, then tried it on and looked at himself in the dark TV screen. "You don't have to," he said. I said I wanted to. It was true and not true. I wanted the way he looked at me when he fastened the watch, like I was the one who made the room brighter. The sex was good enough to make me forget things, which was the point. For a few hours each week, my body didn't feel like a place where stress lived. He didn't rush. He listened when I told him what I liked. He never checked his phone when we were together. That mattered to me in a way I didn't want to analyze. I slept better on those nights, even if I only slept for an hour. I woke up to his kitchen clock clicking and the sound of a neighbor's shower. I left before sunrise, hair pulled under a cap again. Kyle seemed genuinely attracted to me. He said, "You're beautiful," like a fact. He said, "You're fun," like he was surprised. He kissed my forehead when he thought I was asleep. But there were rules he didn't say out loud. He never wanted to go out, not even for a quick dinner. He said restaurants were loud. He said he preferred to cook. He said he didn't like crowds. When I asked if he wanted to meet for coffee one afternoon near the hospital, he texted that he had to lift at a different gym across town. He never wanted to meet my friends. It was always his couch, his curtains half closed, his TV on mute. He stacked our wine corks in a little tower on the counter and knocked it down with his knuckle. He made pasta with jar sauce and oversalted it so we drank more water. He set my gym bag on the same chair every time, like a ritual. If I reached for his hand by the window, he moved us back to the couch. "Better here," he said once. He smiled when he said it. I smiled back. I pretended it didn't mean anything. I noticed anyway. In January, I ran into him at the cafe on Elm Avenue after a night shift. The place smelled like old espresso and sanitizer. He wore a dark hoodie and a cap pulled low. We stood in line, side by side, not touching. I was reading the menu board even though I always get the same thing. The bell over the door made a weak sound. I turned and saw Sarah come in with a stack of folders against her chest. She saw me first. Then she saw Kyle's profile under the cap. Her mouth opened and then closed without a word. She stopped, shifted the folders, and kept walking because people were behind her. I said her name. Quiet. She didn't answer. Kyle took off his cap to push hair from his forehead. The movement was small, automatic. I watched Sarah's face change in real time. It looked like something inside her fell. She set the folders on a table hard enough to bend a corner, then picked up her cup and left. He stared after her and said, "I have to fix this." He didn't look at me when he said it. He stepped out of line and went through the door. The bell sounded again. For a minute I stood there holding nothing. The barista called the next order. I walked to the table where Sarah dropped her folders and smoothed the bent edge with my thumb. Then I left the cafe and sat in my car with my hands on the wheel until my break ended. He ended it that same day. After my shift, he waited by my car, hood up, hands in his pockets. He said, "I can't upset my mother. This has to stop." He didn't sound angry. He sounded like he was reading instructions. I nodded because I understood instructions. 2 nurses walked by, talking loud about a code brown. He took a step back so they wouldn't see his face, and then he left. After that, he stopped answering my texts. At the gym, he kept his distance and scheduled other clients on my days. Sarah called me that evening. I picked up on the first ring. She didn't let me say hello. She screamed until my ear got hot. She said I took advantage of her son. She said I destroyed their relationship. She said he was naive about older women and I should have known better at my age. I tried to tell her I didn't know he was her son. I said it twice. She said, "You knew enough," and hung up. 15 years of friendship ended on a deadline. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone face down. The worst part wasn't losing Kyle. It was realizing what I was to her now. Predator. Manipulator. Those words stuck to me when I walked through the hospital halls. We had connections in every unit. A charge nurse greeted me and then changed her face like she remembered something. 2 techs got quiet when I stepped into the supply room. No one said it to my face, but I felt it when eyes flicked from my badge to my hands. I kept moving. I counted meds out loud. I charted every detail and double-checked my keys. Kyle got a new job at a gym across town. I heard about it by the water fountain like it was the weather. I stayed at Iron Palace. I told myself it was because it was close to work. It was also because I hoped I would see him. Sometimes he visited his old co-workers. I would see him by the front desk, arms crossed, laughing at something. If our eyes met, he didn't show it. He looked past me like I was glass. I re-racked my weights, wiped the bench, and left early. The panic started in small pieces. My chest went tight during incline presses. I sat on the floor by the wall and counted my breaths until the numbers on my watch made sense. A teenager asked if I was okay and held out his water. I said yes before he could get a manager. I moved to the back row of treadmills by the exit and watched the mirror so I could see who came in. Every clang of plates made me flinch. I wondered who knew. I wondered what story Sarah told. Her reaction made me question everything. I replayed the cafe, the bell, the cap, the way she put the folders down. I thought about the jacket and the watch I bought. I tried to remember who suggested wine first. Doubt chewed through my confidence faster than the divorce ever did. I smiled at patients, took blood, changed dressings, then hid in a bathroom stall to steady my hands. I felt like everyone was grading me on rules I didn't have. It has been 8 months now. I still go to the same gym. I park under the same light. I wear the same cap. I keep his number in my phone. Sometimes I type messages and never send them. Hope you're okay. I'm sorry. Do you think about me? They sit in drafts like sealed envelopes I'm scared to mail. I tell myself to delete the number. I don't. Routine holds me in place because changing it feels like admitting guilt to someone I can't see. I cross paths with Sarah at conferences. The last time was in a cold hotel ballroom with bad coffee. She wore a blazer and a badge. Her eyes went over me like I was a wall. The look was clean and cold. My skin prickled under my jacket. I didn't try to speak. I sat in the back near the exit, took notes I didn't need, and left during the questions. I started noticing cars that matched my route home. A silver sedan stayed 1 lane back from the hospital to the river 2 days in a row. A white SUV took the same left I did near the pharmacy. I told myself it was nothing. The city is small. Roads overlap. Still, I changed lanes without a reason and watched who moved with me. I checked my rear view at every red light. I rolled into my driveway and waited with the engine running to see if anyone slowed. No one did. I locked my door twice anyway. Last week, after a late shift, I found a note on my windshield. It was folded once and tucked under the wiper. Lined paper, torn from a notebook. In neat handwriting. Stay away from young men. You're embarrassing yourself. No name, no signature, no time. My stomach went hard. I looked around the lot. A couple argued near the entrance. An older man loaded groceries into a trunk. No one watched me. I slid the note into my pocket and drove home with the radio off. I don't know who wrote it. Sarah. Kyle. Someone at work. Someone at the gym. Someone who heard a story and added their line. The sentence followed me into the kitchen, into the shower, into the dark. I put the note in a drawer with manuals and rubber bands, I stood in the hallway with the light on and listened to my building settle. I told myself to act normal. I washed my uniform and set it on a chair. The worst part is simple. That note wants me small. It works for a moment, and then it doesn't. The plain truth sits in my chest like a stone. I know I would do it all again if Kyle gave me another chance, and that realization scares me more than any anonymous note ever could. In July 2018, my wife and I drove a rented SUV across Utah and Colorado, weeks of parks and highways. That evening we were in the Colorado mountains on Highway 50, the sun low and orange behind long ridges there. We saw a turnout for a state campground near Twin Lakes and decided to stop before the light dropped away. It looked scenic and remote, tall pines around gravel loops, with a self-registration box bolted to an iron post. Several RVs and trailers were already set up under the trees, generators humming somewhere out of sight like distant bees. We were the only ones with a regular tent and plastic bins, two tired people setting up late that evening. I parked, opened the hatch, and lifted our cooler, when an older man appeared from a big trailer beside us. He looked about 65, sunburned at the neck, white socks and sandals, and a hard fixed smile on him. Texas plates on his fifth wheel, chrome ladder on the back, bright decals, lawn mat rolled beside the steps there. He stuck out his hand and said, "Charles," like we were neighbors already, then started talking before we answered anything. He asked where we started, where we were going next, and how many miles we drove that day in mountains. He asked about gas mileage, lodging, reservations, our budget, if we liked our rental, and if we had decent coolers. He nodded like a clerk, repeating bits back to us, holding eye contact a second too long each time there. The friendliness felt more like pressure, a soft push toward details we wouldn't normally share with someone we just met. While my wife slid a storage bin onto the table, Charles leaned toward our hatch and started inventorying our gear. "Cooler, stove, sleeping pads, tent," he said, tapping the rental sticker on our window like he recognized the company name. He told a story about a Moab blowout, stared past me at our stuff, then laughed at our small tent. I walked to the iron post, filled an envelope, wrote the plate, and dropped coins into the rusted slot there. We chose a site near the pavilion to have a light and a spigot, since daylight was going fast already. Tall pines threw long shadows across hard ground, and the lake showed silver through gaps in the trees beyond us. A laminated sheet warned about bears and food storage. Another listed quiet hours and the sheriff number for emergencies late. I checked my phone and saw 0 bars, then felt the air cooling hard as the light went down fast. We moved quickly, laying the footprint, staking corners, bending poles, clipping fabric, working like we had done this 100 times. Across the lane, Charles hovered near his trailer door like he wanted to step over again and could not decide. He raised a hand halfway, then scratched his chin and clanked around in a storage compartment with some metal thing. I felt better when other sounds rose up, chairs scraping, a TV laugh from a window, a dog collar jingling. We kept an eye on the tree line and the road as we worked, staying and keeping hands moving constantly. My wife asked about dinner, and we decided to use the pavilion since flames were allowed only at designated tables. Simple plan. Tent up, cook fast, eat, and call it early, under a light and near the water spigot there. Charles called over when he saw our little coffee maker on the table beside the stove and the cutting board. He said, "I got great coffee in my trailer," then added that he didn't drink coffee because of stomach problems. He kept smiling and waving at his open door, insisting we come inside so he could scoop some for us. We told him we were tired from driving and needed to finish before dark, and we stayed polite but firm. He tried more, then scratched his chin, said we should stop by if we changed our minds, and wandered off. We finished the tent, zipped the door, and carried the food and stove to the pavilion to cook our meal. Concrete pad, 3 tables, buzzing fluorescent, bulletin board of rules and notices, and a big trash can with a bungee. The lake sat down a slope, flat and dark, with a thin band of color still hanging across the shore. A breeze pushed the cold water smell up into the pines, and the place felt more remote in that light. While the pan warmed, I noticed Charles walking down to the lake without a jacket, hands in his pockets there. No fishing rod or camera, just slow dusk walk, stepping onto a rock and looking across to the other side. He bent, picked up a stone, let it drop again, and the clicks carried across water like small glass taps. I kept my eyes on the stove and tracked him in the corner of my vision while my wife chopped. Oil popped on the little burner, and the light threw a hard circle that left the far corners dim there. From the loop, we got only small noises, a door, a laugh, a collar jingle, then nothing again for minutes. We ate from metal bowls with our backs to the wind, and I wiped the table with a paper towel. My wife looked toward the lake and back at me, and we didn't need words to know we felt uneasy. He seemed like a harmless grandfather on the surface. Maybe we were just tired, but we decided to be cautious. I tied the trash bag in a double knot and hooked it under the bungee on the can near us. The generator clicked off, and the silence after it felt wrong, like stepping into a room that didn't want us. I checked sight from the pavilion and saw the tent sitting small in the dark, a thing on the ground. When we finished eating, Charles came up from the shoreline, slow pace, hands in his pockets, passing near the pavilion. We kept our faces down and tried to avoid eye contact by getting absorbed in quiet conversation with each other. He still saw us. He turned from the path and came straight to our table like he had a reason to be there. I kept my spoon in my hand and ate. My wife did the same, keeping our bowls close, like staying busy would end the talk quicker. He started in without a hello. He asked how long we had been married, if we planned kids, what we did for work, and if our jobs let us take long trips. He asked our ages, then asked if we rented or owned at home. He asked how expensive our cities were. He asked our income. He asked if our families worried about us driving in mountains. It felt like one form after another, a list that didn't stop. I gave short answers and kept my eyes on my bowl. My wife said, "We don't really talk numbers," and moved the salt closer to her. He watched our hands while we ate, like the food was a prop and he had a timer running. He noticed our bottled water in a crate under the table and said, "I got cold soda in my trailer," then added again that he didn't drink soda because of health issues. He gestured up the lane. "Come inside. I got flavors, you pick." That was the 3rd time that night. We both said no. Thanks. He stood there, a step too close to my wife's side of the bench, waiting like we would change our minds if the silence dragged. I set my spoon down, met his eyes, and told him we were staying here to finish, and then going to sleep early. He smiled, but the corners didn't move. He said we should stop by later. I said, "We won't." He nodded like he didn't hear me, then finally turned away and headed to his trailer. We finished the bowls fast, cleaned them with the little water we planned, wiped the table, and packed the stove and pan back into the bin. The light flickered once and buzzed. I carried the trash. She took the toothbrushes and the small pouch with toothpaste. We wanted to get away from the pavilion and the open sight line. We took the path back toward our tent. Charles stepped out from behind his truck like he was just then measuring a strap. He waved us down, like a parking lot attendant. "You two want to sit a while? TV's on. Or we play cards." He pointed his thumb at the open door of the trailer. The TV glow moved across the screen inside. Some game show, blue and white flashes hitting a hanging jacket. We both said no again. I didn't add a smile this time. I said we were going to the lake and then bed. He said the night gets long and boring. I kept walking. My wife matched me. He stood in the road and watched us pass, then turned and walked back to his steps. It was getting dark in the trees and the gravel path felt colder, like the day snapped shut. We walked down the slope toward the parking area by the lake, our shoes crunching in the grit. The dumpsters sat together on a concrete pad beside a rail fence, big metal boxes with heavy lids. I lifted our trash to toss it in, and we both stopped at the same time. Something moved inside the nearest container, slow scraping across metal. We heard the hollow echo of claws. I saw a dark back rise over the rim. The body rolled up, heavy. Then a long shape moved behind it. My first thought was a big dog, but it climbed like no dog. The thing turned its head, ears flat to the side. The lid knocked against the hinges, and the sound popped across the lot. It froze when it heard our steps. We stepped back. It dropped from the rim, hit the ground hard, and the weight of it shook the gravel. Then it ran past the fence line, 4 beats, strong and low, long tail a black line behind it. It cut into the brush and vanished. The smell of trash hung in the cold air. For a second we just stood and listened. The trees were quiet. I pushed our bag into the second dumpster and pulled the lid down careful. We both kept our eyes on the dark gap where it ran. We didn't speak. We went to the restroom building by the lot lights and brushed our teeth there, watching the tree line in the mirror. A moth kicked around the bulb. The faucet sputtered and hissed. The moment we finished, we walked straight back up toward our site, no detours. I looked left and right down each lane. The dog from earlier didn't make a sound now. The generators were off, the TV laugh track ended, and the campground felt empty in the worst way, like a building after closing. We got to our tent, zipped the door, took a quick look inside, then zipped it again. My wife said she didn't want to be in fabric if a bear came back. I agreed before she finished the sentence. I unlocked the SUV, put the cooler behind the front seats, and moved our bags to the trunk area. We put the seats down and laid the sleeping bags out, heads by the rear door. I checked the locks twice. We left the tent staked, clean and empty, nothing scented inside. The night smelled like pine and cold lake water. We lay back and looked at the headliner of the rental, and the tiny light from the dash blinked at an even pace. The forest sounds were not loud, but they came in layers. Small ticks, wind in pine needles, something shifting weight. Then nothing. Then a snap again. I set my phone face down and watched the fog of our breath move near the window. Somewhere past midnight, a vehicle drove the highway far off, a line of dots passing gaps in trees. I closed my eyes, then opened them at each new sound, then closed them again. A zipper from another site went shh, and then quiet. At one point, a soft pad of footsteps moved along the gravel near our bumper, and I held my breath without meaning to. The steps went past, paused, then kept going. I didn't try to guess if it was a person or not. We slept in bursts and woke to the gray light before sunrise. The cold made the windows sweat. My back felt like it had been folded wrong, but we were fine. No paw marks on the glass. No new tire tracks near us. I sat up, turned the key one notch to move the seat back, and rubbed my hands until the feeling came back. We got out fast, moved fast. We pulled stakes, collapsed the tent, stuffed it into the bag, shook out the footprint, rolled the pads. My wife bagged the cooking gear. I drained the little water left from the jug and took the empty bottles to the car. A few doors opened on distant trailers. The campground felt like a job site before the day starts. I looked for Charles out of habit. His steps were down, the door closed, the lawn mat stretched out flat as if staged, and his truck hood was cold under a layer of dew. No movement, no sign of anyone at his window. We loaded, checked the site for trash, and pulled out. We didn't see the bear again. We didn't see Charles. We drove east with the sun in our faces and the mountains behind us. We didn't talk much. We stopped for gas in a small town, cleaned the windshield, and checked our map for the next park. We asked each other if we overreacted. Maybe the man was bored and wanted company. Maybe the soda thing was just habit. It was easy to say that now in bright daylight on a highway. That afternoon, my phone rang. My brother's name on the screen. I put him on speaker in the cup holder. He asked where we were and if we were safe. He said he saw news about Colorado police putting out an alert for 2 men who had been robbing tourists at remote campgrounds, including spots near lakes and highway pull-offs. They used a gun and worked late at night, hitting people who stayed in tents. He read the county names, and I pictured the map in my head. He said the descriptions didn't match anyone we met, just the locations and type of victims. He told us to be careful about who we talked to. I said we would. When the call ended, we adjusted our plan and picked a busier campground for the next night. We kept driving. We watched the mirrors a little more than before. We were glad we trusted our instincts, even if we never learned who he really was. So for context, I was 13 in 2007, an 8th grader living with my mom and little sister in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta. 1-story ranch houses, short driveways, same squeaky mailboxes. My parents had just started letting me stay home for an hour. It felt huge. In fall, I got strep and missed school. I begged Mom not to call my aunt to babysit. I said I could handle it. Mom worked at an insurance office off the highway. That morning she warmed tea, set 2 Tylenol on the counter, and put the phone on the table. "No door, no phone," she said. "Call me if you need me." I nodded. My throat hurt. She left after 9. I watched her car back down the driveway and vanish past the magnolia. I locked the door and checked the peephole anyway. The house smelled like heater dust. I pulled a blanket over the couch and turned on daytime talk shows. I took my pills with tea and texted a friend I felt gross. The living room had beige carpet, a low table, and an armchair by the hall. In back, the sliding door opened to a tiny porch and steps down to the yard. Our backyard had a chain-link fence and a lean shed. By it was a decorative weather vane with a scratched rooster. When wind came through the pines, the vane squeaked and turned. The street was quiet. A dog barked once. A mail truck clattered by around 11 and left coupons. I dropped the volume and drifted off with the blanket under my chin. The house held that weekday silence. The fridge clicked on and off. A faucet dripped in the kitchen. My fever made me sweat and then shiver. The phone buzzed. It was Mom. I told her I ate toast and would nap again. She repeated the rules. "Please don't open for anyone," she said. "Even if they say they're from the power company." I said okay and hung up. I must have really slept after that. The TV washed the room in blue light. The bathroom light down the hall was still on because I was a baby about the dark. I shifted and the blanket slipped to the floor. I remember thinking I should pick it up later. The minute I relaxed again, I fell asleep. The sound that woke me was metal on concrete. Sharp and sudden. It came from the backyard and I sat up fast, heart punching once. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then the talk show faces on the screen snapped into place. I thought wind finally knocked the weather vane over. That made sense. The cable box said 2:01 p.m. I listened. The heater was off and the house felt hollow. No pipes, no cars. I stood and the carpet was cool under my socks. I steadied myself on the armchair and rubbed my throat. Then I heard a faint scratch from the back of the house. Not the vane. A thin, steady scrape, like metal on metal. I told myself it could be a branch against the porch screen. I walked into the kitchen, slow and quiet. I didn't want to look out the window. I filled a glass to do something and kept my eyes on the sink. The scratching stopped. I stood still with my hand on the counter. Then it started again, louder. It was right at the screen door by the porch light. The sound had a rhythm, like someone pinching the latch and sliding it. My throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with being sick. I set the glass down too hard and it thumped. I backed out of the kitchen and moved to the living room. The phone was on the coffee table with the cord curled up. I picked it up and froze. Metal clicked again from the back. Careful, patient. Click, slide, repeat. I pictured fingers working at the hook. I lowered the TV almost to zero and crouched behind the armchair. It faced the front door and gave me an angle on the entry. The fabric smelled dusty. I pulled my knees in and tried to make myself smaller. The screen door squealed open. That noise cut through my head. I pressed lower, but the chair's back was low. My shoulders still stuck up no matter how I folded. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch. They were slow and solid, weight on each board. They stopped at our welcome mat. The main door was right there, 2 inches of wood and a brass deadbolt. The first hit on the door sounded like a sledge. The frame shook. There was a pause, then the second slam, louder. The talk show murmured in the background like a ghost of a crowd. He slammed the door a third time. The pictures on the wall shifted on their nails. I thought about the bathroom at the end of the hall, the lock, the window over the tub. But to get there, I'd have to pass the entry. My elbows dug into the carpet. I tried to slide lower. The fourth slam came with a cracking pop. The deadbolt split. The door swung open and banged the stopper. The air changed when the sun came in. He stepped over the threshold, slow, big, wide shoulders and thick forearms, not fat. Navy work pants, a pale button-up shirt with a stitched logo over the pocket. A tool belt hung low, heavy with things I couldn't see well. A dark cap shadowed his face. I saw a clean-shaved jaw and a flat mouth. He looked official enough, not friendly. Nothing moved. He didn't advance. One boot on the mat, one inside. He looked left, right, then at me because head and shoulders stuck up over the armchair. The house went quiet. He stared under the brim. For several seconds, we just stared at each other in complete silence. I started screaming. It came out raw and loud, the kind of sound that hurts your own ears. I did not plan it. It just ripped out. The man flinched like I hit him. He turned fast, boots scraping the wood, and ran. He went back through the open door and down the steps. I heard the screen slap. His footsteps hit the porch and then the yard. For a second, I could only hear my breath and the TV whispering. The front door hung open. Cold air pushed in. I tried to sink lower, but the armchair trapped my hips. I twisted and the fabric caught my shirt. I got one leg free, and then the other. My knee hit the table and the remote fell. I grabbed the landline with both hands. My fingers shook and I almost dropped it. I dialed my stepdad because his number was muscle memory. It rang once and he answered. I started talking, but he hung up. The busy tone hit and I stared at the handset. That made me panic more. I looked at the front door again. The deadbolt was split and hanging crooked. I backed up toward the hall and the bathroom. The idea was simple: lock a real door and stay put. I stepped around the armchair and moved fast. The bathroom is small, just a sink, toilet, and tub with a high window. I shut the door and turned the lock. I sat on the closed toilet lid and held the phone. I listened for footsteps. I did not hear any. I heard my own breath, and the heater clicking on. The house sounded different with the door open out front. Traffic noise carried more. I thought about calling 911 myself. I thought about calling Mom. I did not do either because I trusted he would call. He always did things like that first and simple. I kept the phone in my lap and counted to 100. After a minute, the phone rang in my hands. I almost dropped it again. It was him. He told me to stay in the bathroom. He said he was calling 911 on his other line and was on the way. His voice was fast and short. He told me to keep the door locked and not move. Then he hung up again. I sat still and watched the doorknob. The lock pin sat straight. I watched it like it could slip. Time moved slow. I heard a car door outside that sounded like ours. Then I heard two more. Voices came, not angry, just clear. I knew Mom's voice. I knew his. Another voice was deeper and said, "Clear the front." A radio crackled. A knock came on the bathroom door, softer than before. "It's us," Mom said. "Open up." I unlocked it and stepped back. They were in the hall. Mom stood behind him. Two officers were in the living room by the broken door. One held the door with his shoulder so it would not swing. The other looked at the frame with a small flashlight. Mom hugged me once and let go. My stepdad said he hung up so he could call 911 and drive. He said he was 10 minutes away at work and broke every speed rule getting here. He looked angry, but he kept his voice level. We moved to the living room. The officers asked if I was hurt. I said no. They asked what I saw. I told them the man was big, not fat, with navy pants and a pale work shirt. I said there was a stitched logo over his pocket, round or shield-shaped. I described the tool belt and the cap. I told them he forced the back screen and then broke the lock at the front. I said his footsteps were heavy and patient. One officer wrote notes on a small pad. The other took photos of the split deadbolt and the scraped latch at the porch. The screen had a clean gouge where a tool slid under and popped it. He pointed it out. He measured the shoe prints on the porch steps with a small plastic ruler. Our welcome mat had a smear of dirt from his boot edge. They collected that too. The sun had shifted, and the entry light looked harsher on the scuffed paint. The officers told us there were scams going on. People were wearing fake utility uniforms. They came in the day when most houses were empty. They would ask to check meters or lines. Once inside, they would unlock a back door or take small stuff fast. Sometimes one would distract while another went around. Our man did not expect a kid home on a Tuesday. Their radios chirped while they talked. One of them called in the description. They told us not to let anyone in without an appointment we knew about. Real workers would leave a notice and return later. We should ask for ID at the closed door and call the company number on the bill, not any number on a badge. They said to keep doors locked even in daylight. My stepdad asked about patrols. They said cars were already circling. They would canvass the street and knock on doors. They asked if we had cameras. We did not. They checked the yard and the side gate, and then went to talk to neighbors. I stood with Mom in the kitchen. The glass I left by the sink had a print from my hand. The back screen had a bent corner where his tool levered under. You could see the shiny scrape. The fence gate was ajar by 2 inches and clicking in the wind. The weather vane lay on its side by the shed like a broken toy. The rooster's paint was scratched white. A neighbor came over and said he had not seen a truck. Another said someone had walked past with a toolbox around one. The officers took the statements and then came back. They said no one matched the description on their drive-through. They said to fix the lock today. They left us a card with a report number. They asked me to repeat the description one more time. I did. The officer nodded and said, "You did good." That night, my stepdad screwed a metal plate over the door frame. He replaced the deadbolt with a longer one and longer screws. He tested it twice and the frame did not flex. He put a bar in the track of the sliding back door. We ate takeout in the living room and kept the TV on low. When it got dark, the house felt different. Smaller, tighter. Every creak was sharp. I slept on the couch and left the lamp on. In the years after, until I left for college, nothing like that happened again. The house stayed quiet. We added a peephole camera and a new porch light. We made a rule that no one opened the door without a call first. Still, the memory stayed clean in my head. Those seconds where we looked at each other over the chair stayed sharp. I think about what would have happened if I had stayed silent. If I had frozen harder or tried to run past him. Maybe he would have walked in farther and closed the door. Maybe he would have put a hand on me. I do not chase those thoughts long. I keep them short and simple so they do not take root. Noise helped. Distance helped. The lesson was basic. Do not open to strangers. Check badges through glass. Call the company on your bill. Tell them to wait while you verify. If they press, it is a no. I was a kid who remembered a rule at the right time. I was also lucky. The scream came out, and he left. A small thing made a big change. Even now, years later, the sound of a screen being lifted makes me stand up fast. A squeal of old hinges pulls me back to the bathroom door, and the cold air through the opening. If a worker shows up unannounced, I keep the door closed and my phone in my hand. I ask for a name and a work order. I call a number I know is real. I am grateful my first move was not to argue or to peek or to open. I did not try to be brave or clever. I made sound. I made it big and simple. It worked. It pushed him outside and put time between us. That split second likely saved me from more than a broken lock and a mess to clean. When I remember it, I see the cracked deadbolt, the hanging door, and the man turning away. My name is Michael Thompson. I'm 34 now, but when I was 30, I became principal of Lincoln Elementary in Springfield, and I walked into that office like I had all the answers. We had a framed mission statement on the wall and a shiny new PBIS chart outside the conference room. My wife Emily is a child psychologist, so back then we joked that between the two of us we were a full-service clinic. We told ourselves that our home would be quiet, structured, and kind. That was the plan. The reality was different the minute we closed our own front door. Our oldest, Ethan, is 7. He has been violent since he was 3. He bit kids at daycare hard enough to leave purple circles on their arms. He threw wooden blocks at staff and then smiled when they flinched. At home, he'd go rigid and scream for hours over the wrong color cup, over a sock seam, over nothing I could name. I stood in doorways while he raged, watching the clock tick past bedtime, holding the knob because he would rip it open and bolt. Once, after a tantrum, I found a bite mark on my own wrist and could not remember when he grabbed me. The twins, Noah and Liam, are 5 and have ADHD. If you don't watch them for 60 seconds, they find a marker and draw on the dishwasher. They climb the pantry shelves. They snap the blinds. We put latches on the fridge and locks on 2 closet doors and a bell on the back slider because Liam loves to run. We keep the remotes in a shoebox on top of the fridge. The coffee table has a taped corner where Noah tripped the week we forgot his afternoon dose. Toys live in bins with picture labels that they ignore. We spend over $2,000 a month on therapists, psychiatrists, and medications. I know the copays better than I know my own cholesterol. There are pill organizers on the counter with tiny doors labeled MTWTFSS. There are laminated behavior charts stuck to the freezer with magnet clips. Every Sunday night I sit with a spreadsheet and a stack of appointment cards. That's why I tutor on weekends. I grade math packets at strangers' kitchen tables while their kids color quietly nearby. It's not lost on me that I run a school by day and teach other people's well-behaved kids on Saturdays to afford help for my own disasters. Every week I stand in front of parents at meetings and talk about regulation and reinforcement. I say phrases like clear expectations and timely praise and consistent consequences. I hold a calm voice while a mother cries about her son hitting. I nod while a father asks if he's raising a monster. My staff watches me like I'm the grown-up in the room. Then I walk out, past the bulletin board with their kids' good work, and drive home to where our walls have dents the size of a child's heel. Mornings are the worst. Ethan won't wear jeans because the button feels wrong, so it's sweatpants again, which gets me a note from his uniform school. The twins chase our cat under the table. Someone spills cereal. Someone kicks the car seat buckle. I pull into the drop-off lane late with coffee I won't drink and a tie that has tiny oatmeal dots. I step into the building smiling, say good morning to 5 teachers, and start answering emails with subject lines like behavior concern. At work, I can solve things. I rearrange a schedule. I call a social worker. I sit with a kid for 20 minutes and he goes back to class. At home, I hear the same 3 names all day. The nurse calls because Ethan hit someone at recess. The classroom aide calls because Liam ran toward the street at pickup. The sitter texts because Noah climbed the dresser again. My phone vibrates until the battery dips below 20% by noon. I carry a charger that lives next to my radio and keys. I used to talk with other dads on the sidelines at soccer. I stopped. I didn't want to explain why we left early or why the twins weren't enrolled. We keep snacks and noise-canceling headphones in the glove box. We keep extra shirts in the trunk. Once a week, I tell myself we're going to eat at a restaurant like a normal family. We never finish. Last fall, Ethan got expelled from St. Mary's Academy for hitting his teacher with a stapler during math. He didn't throw it. He walked up, grabbed it off her desk, and swung. She raised her arm, and it hit her forearm. The nurse called us. The principal said the words, "We can't keep him here," and I knew the rest without asking. That was his 3rd school in 2 years. No one could handle him longer than a season. I sat in my car outside their office with my badge still clipped to my belt and felt like a headline. School leader's son removed for violence. I felt like a complete fraud. I was booked to speak at a regional meeting 2 weeks after the incident. The topic was building safe classrooms. I stood under fluorescent lights and talked about de-escalation strategies while the skin on my face felt too tight. People lined up to thank me afterward, holding notebooks, asking for templates, asking what I do when a kid uses a stapler as a weapon. I told them the truth without telling them my truth. I said, "You remove the object. You stay between the student and others. You lower your voice." I didn't say, "You sign expulsion papers with your own last name on the top line." Emily was breaking down daily by then. She would get through 3 clients, take off her glasses, and press her palms into her eyes until her fingers whitened. The schools called her because her number was listed first, and I would hear her voice change, thin and flat, while she tried to sound clinical. At home, she sat on the floor with the medication bottles and rechecked dosages like a new nurse. She made lists of specialists. She stayed up late searching for programs. She kept a folder on the counter with tabs: neuropsych, behaviorist, OT. She cried silently a lot and went back to work because if she stopped, we couldn't pay for anything. We didn't talk about anything except which therapy to try next or which specialist to see. We weren't cruel, we were tired. We ran on logistics. We handed off kids like batons in a relay. Our bed felt like a staging area with piles of clean clothes and forms to sign. I started sleeping on the couch sometimes so I could wake up at 5 without waking her. We never made plans that weren't for the boys. We never finished a movie. The twins needed rigid routines, and we tried to enforce them. Dinner at 6, bath at 6:30, stories at 7. Any variance and they erupted. We tried family outings anyway because you still try. At restaurants, the twins would slap the table and Ethan would steal the salt shaker, and Emily would whisper, "Check please," before the drinks even came. At the park, one would run for the parking lot, and one would lie flat on the mulch, screaming. People stared. We learned where exits were. We learned which booths had corners and which parks had fences. I started dreading parent-teacher conferences in a way that didn't make sense for a principal. I used to enjoy them, talking to parents about growth, progress, goals. Now I watched mothers pull out lists of questions, and I heard my own voice in theirs. Fathers asked me how to handle homework meltdowns. I gave them steps and scripts while I pictured Ethan's face in our kitchen, red and wet, over a worksheet with 5 subtraction problems. People thanked me for my help. They told me I must be a great dad. I smiled and nodded and stacked their forms into neat piles. Every afternoon blended into the next. There were calls, crises, pickups, pharmacy runs, notes from schools that used words like safety plan and placement. I kept a jacket on the back of my office chair and a spare in my car because I was always leaving in a rush. I started staying late because there was less noise in the building after 5. Then I would drive home slowly and sit in the driveway a minute longer than I should, listening to the fan in the dash, hand on the key, and then I would open the door and go inside. Every night I came home exhausted from solving other people's children's problems, only to face my own unsolvable ones. That December evening I came home after a 12-hour day and 2 tutoring stops. The house was loud before I turned the key. Ethan threw plastic dinosaurs at the wall and yelled about his video game. The twins fought over chicken nuggets. Emily sat at the table with red eyes and a stack of bills. The sink was full. I picked up Ethan's tablet. Frozen level. He screamed at me to fix it. I told him to breathe. He kicked the coffee table. I reached for the tablet again. When I said we would pause and reset, he looked into my face and said, "You're the worst father in the world and I hate you." It felt like a door slammed. I grabbed him by the shoulders. I didn't squeeze hard, but my hands were firm. My voice came out louder than I meant. "Well, I hate what you've turned our family into." Emily's chair scraped the tile. She stared at me like she didn't know me. Ethan went still. The twins stopped crying to watch. I set the tablet on the couch and stepped back. The room smelled like ketchup and sweat. Emily said my name once, quiet. I walked to the guest room and shut the door. I lay on the bed in my work clothes and yelled into a pillow. I stared at the ceiling fan. I listened to the house until it went quiet. I slept there with the window cracked and the streetlight on the wall. In the morning, I made coffee. Ethan ate cereal and didn't mention anything. He asked for more milk. His eyes slid away from mine. I packed lunches and kept my voice gentle. Inside, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. After that, I started drinking wine at night to sleep. 1 glass turned into 2. Emily saw it and said nothing. She went to her doctor and came home with a small orange bottle. She showed it to me. We both knew. She brought up a residential treatment facility for Ethan. She said we could tour. She said it might help all of us. I pictured work people finding out. I told her we needed to try more things first. We booked family therapy and changed psychiatrists again. We sat in waiting rooms with a humming fish tank. Nothing held for long. A week of calm, then a call from school, then a hole in the drywall near the door. The twins' medication helped a little, but any change blew everything up. If dinner was late, or the power flickered, or the neighbor's dog barked, the routine broke, and we paid for it. We locked the knife drawer. We kept a spare key in a code box after Liam hid ours. At work, colleagues talked about trips and spelling bees. I learned to smile and nod. I skipped the winter concert and said I had coverage issues. I was the person people asked for advice. I was also the person who almost lost it in his own living room. I thought about my father, who left when I was 10. I used to think he was weak. Now I understood leaving like a map you keep in a glove box. Some nights I parked in the driveway and sat for 20 minutes. I watched the porch light move across the siding. Then I went inside and kept moving. I started searching jobs in other states. Just looking, I told myself. I kept tabs open with listings and school ratings. I imagined a fresh start. Then I closed the tabs and answered emails about bus routes and cafeteria schedules. I felt like I was cheating on my own life. Last month I met a real estate agent during my lunch break. I told her we were thinking about a change. She walked through our house while Emily took the kids to the park. She pointed at dents in the hallway and scuffs on the door frames and made notes. She sent me an estimate later. I didn't show Emily. I saved it in a folder titled Taxes. I started having panic attacks at school board meetings. It came fast, like my tie was a hand. I kept water at my seat and a folder to grip sometimes. I looked at the clock and counted down. I was sure someone would stand up and say they knew, that they had seen Ethan, that they had heard about the stapler. Emily said we should talk about divorce. She said maybe shared custody would give us both rest. She didn't sound angry. She sounded like she was reading a plan. I told her I was afraid of what people would think. She said that was not a reason to live like this. We sat at the table and didn't finish the conversation. At night, I pictured Ethan walking into my building. I pictured a teacher grabbing the radio, my name on the call. I saw my staff looking at me the way Emily had looked at me in the kitchen. I woke sweating. I checked the doors twice. I checked the stove. I lay there and tried to slow my breathing while the fridge kicked on and off. One afternoon, I passed two teachers in the hallway. They were talking about a student who had pinned a classmate and bit him. They weren't cruel. I felt sick and kept walking. I knew someday they could be talking about my son in that same voice. I held the railing and waited for my hands to stop shaking. I love my children. I also hate the life this has become. I hate how it turned our house into alarms and lists. I don't know how much longer I can act like it is fine. I still make lunches and fix the router. Sometimes I stare at families and restaurants and wonder what it feels like to have kids who don't ruin every outing. Me and my girlfriend Samantha rent a small house at the far edge of a suburb outside Seattle. The houses are spaced out, and our closest neighbors are about 200 feet away. It was a Tuesday at 3:30 a.m. when that quiet broke. Someone started pounding on our front door like they were trying to split it. The knocking wasn't normal. It was fast, hard, and angry, not the rhythm of someone who needed a jump start. I keep a baseball bat on my side of the bed. I reached for it, and before I even sat up, a woman's voice erupted from the porch, loud enough to cut through the walls. She was screaming that she felt sick, that she needed help, and telling us to open the door right now. She didn't ask. She ordered. Every time she yelled, She slammed the door even harder, as if shouting and force would work together. Samantha pressed her hand on my arm and didn't say a word. I listened for other footsteps, for a car, for voices. There was only the woman and the hit on the door. Once the knob rattled like she twisted hard, then more pounding, quicker, like she was losing patience. I slid out of bed and put both hands on the bat. I moved to the bedroom doorway and paused there, looking down the short hall toward the front. Samantha stayed on the bed, eyes open in the dark. The woman shouted, "Open up! I'm dying! Open the door!" This didn't sound like any neighbor we knew. Out here, people call first. If someone had wrecked a car or cut a hand, they would have asked for 911, not demanded we open the door. I waited a few seconds in the black, and the pounding grew frantic. I stepped back into the room and picked my phone up from the nightstand. I held the bat against my shoulder and listened one more time. The pounding ran down the frame and up again. For a few beats, she went quiet. Then came another burst and a hoarse scream. We didn't move. It felt like a warning. My gut told me the situation wasn't normal, so I stood at the bedroom doorway with the bat while Samantha lay motionless on the bed, staring at me. I didn't open the door. I called 911. The dispatcher answered quick. I kept my voice low and said a woman was on our porch, screaming she was sick and trying to force the door. The dispatcher said another resident nearby had already called about a similar incident and that patrol cars were on their way. I stayed on the line and moved to the front window. I didn't pull the curtain all the way, just enough to get a narrow view of the porch. The woman's shadow drifted across the glass, moving back and forth in front of the door. She kept hammering the wood with the flat of her hand or shoulder. Every 30 seconds or so, she'd stop and yell something clipped, the kind of tone that comes right before a fight. 15 minutes is a long time when you're measuring it in hits on a door. I watched the shadow lift and fall and tried to track details without being seen. Bare arms, hair tied up, no jacket in cold air. I thought about the back door latch, the slider in the kitchen, the side gate that never sits right. I pictured a second person circling while we focused on the front, and that thought stayed there like a stone. Samantha hadn't moved. Her phone was in her hand in case the call dropped. Once, the woman went quiet for a full minute, and I could hear wet breathing close to the wood, then a whisper I couldn't make out. The silence was worse than the banging. Then she started again, harder, and I saw the top panel flex inward and snap back like a rib. The dispatcher kept talking in a calm voice, told me to stay away from the door and keep the lights off. Outside, our motion light tried to kick on and flickered but didn't hold. The shadow moved in and out of it. I stayed behind the curtain and watched the street. There was no other movement out there. When the police turned onto our street, I saw the faint wash of headlights between the trees, then the flash as they cut their spots. I told the dispatcher they'd arrived, and she said to keep the line open until an officer contacted me. 2 cars rolled slow and stopped by the mailbox. The woman didn't notice them right away. She hit the door twice more, then spun when light found her. 2 officers came up the walk, one in front, one hanging back. I stepped away from the window. Through the door, I heard the woman's voice change from demanding to high and hysterical. I couldn't hear every word. It sounded like she was trying to explain something fast and all at once. The officer spoke low. One told her to step to the side. There was a shuffle on the porch, then quiet, then more quick words. I kept the bat in my hands even then. Samantha sat up but didn't come into the hall. We waited for a knock. I could smell the cold air under the door and the trace of cedar sap. The dispatcher told me an officer would contact us now and ended the call. There was a light tap and a pause, then a firm knock. I took 2 steps toward the door and stopped short of the peephole. I could see the blue shirt through the glass beside the frame. He didn't try the handle. He kept his hands where I could see them. His voice came through clear and steady with the noise on the porch. He knocked again and asked what had been happening. I explained everything to the officer in a plain list. The screaming for help, the orders to open up, the pounding that never stopped. He wrote while I talked. Through the glass, I saw the other cop steady the woman by the railing. She rocked on her heels and stared at the welcome mat like she tried to read it. When they finished with her, they told us to stay back while they cleared the porch. We waited until they waved. Me and Samantha stepped out slow. Cold air smelled like wet cedar. We saw a heavy flashlight on the concrete by the door. Metal body, knurled handle, scratched lens. I set the bat by the frame and picked the light up with 2 fingers. It felt heavy for a knock. The cop photographed it on the ground, then turned to the door. The metal was pocked with deep dents, not just around the lock. High, low, edge to edge, like she'd swung wild. Some edges curled in, paint cracked. She hadn't used only her fists. She'd been hammering with the flashlight. The officer took wide photos and close-ups of the chipped paint. I handed him the light. He bagged it and wrote my name on the label. He had me point to the panels I'd seen flex in and out while she hit. I asked why she did it. He said she was going through difficult times and they were working on resources. He didn't say drugs, but I heard it. When I asked where she came from, he pointed across the street to the low house with the sagging carport. She'd moved in with her elderly parents after some problems. They told us to document the damage, keep the door locked, and call again if anything escalated. They didn't arrest her. They walked her over to that house and spoke to someone on the porch. From our steps, I watched her look back at us more than once. Not angry now. Blank. I counted dents until I lost the number. About 6 hours later, the sun was high when there was another knock. This time it was soft. 2 taps and a pause. I waited and opened with the chain on. It was the same woman. Daylight showed more. Cheeks hollow. Skin gray. Lips cracked. Hands shaking in mild air. "Sorry about last night," she said in a flat voice. "I was having a lot of problems. I can fix your door." How much would new paint cost? I told her it wasn't just paint. The metal was dented and needed real repair. She nodded like she heard something else, eyes on the hinge. "Okay, I'll find someone to do the repairs," she mumbled and turned away. She went down the path without looking back. I shut the door and locked it. Samantha asked what she said. I told her. We sat quiet, listening to cars on the main road. It's Friday, and the house feels different. Every time we leave, she appears at her front door and watches us walk to the car. No wave, no greeting. When we come home, she opens her door when she hears ours and stares across the street like she's checking a box. We park by the garage and use the back walkway to cut our time in view. We filed for a restraining order and were waiting for the report to be ready. The officer told us to log every contact. We bought a small notebook and keep it on the kitchen counter. Date, time, what happened. Most lines say the same. Watched from porch. No approach. No words. She hasn't touched our door again, but we haven't slept right since Tuesday. The smallest sounds feel big. The heater tick. A truck down the hill. I get up twice to check the locks. Samantha checks the slider. We don't wake each other. We just meet in the hall and go back to bed. For the past 3 nights, we've seen her after midnight. At first, I thought it was a tree shadow. Then I lifted a corner of the curtain and saw her near the road, 50 feet from our doorway, moving back and forth under the street lamp. Not a walk, a pace. Heels turning on the same patch of asphalt. We didn't call again because she wasn't on our property. We wrote it down in the notebook and kept watching. Once Samantha whispered, "Is she waiting for someone?" I didn't answer. The woman never looked at the house when I watched. Head down. 10 steps left. Turn. 10 steps right. Turn. Arms folded tight across herself. This morning before sunrise, she was there again. Same spot. Same pace. The street was empty. Frost on the mailbox. Her breath hung small in the air at each pivot. She stood centered on the long seam where the street was patched last fall, like she needed the line to hold her path. We're careful with lights now. Front blinds closed, porch light off. When we take the trash out, we move fast and stay quiet. If the dog 2 houses down barks, we wait and listen. It feels like we live under glass and someone softly taps it now and then with a fingernail. I know there are simple explanations. She could be waiting for a ride that never comes. She could be trying to stay awake so she doesn't use. Those ideas don't change what we do. We secure the doors. We watch the road. We keep the notebook. We plan routes that don't take us past her place. Last night, a little after 1, I checked again and saw her stop. She faced our driveway for maybe 10 seconds, then turned away and started pacing. That pause was worse than the steps. It told me the pattern could shift. She hasn't knocked again. There's no banging now. But she is there, 50 feet from our doorway, walking back and forth. Her presence just 50 feet from our doorway feels just as unsettling. It happened in fall 2017 when I was 23 and had just moved to Portland after a bad breakup. I rented a small studio above a bike shop with a coffee cart under my window and a view of wires and gray sky. I worked odd shifts and came home to silence that did not feel like rest. My phone became my company most nights. I was not looking for romance. I wanted simple human contact, tips about cheap places, which buses ran late without trouble. So I installed a dating app and started swiping with low expectations that night. That is how I met Mark. He said he was 28, a sound engineer, and shared a house with colleagues. In his photos, he had curly hair, a soft beard, and that easy hipster look you see here all the time. He sent me 2 ambient music tracks he said he produced. They were slow and airy, more hum than melody. He wrote about long studio nights and how they rented an old mansion in the artsy part of town because the basement was perfect for a practice room. He sounded busy and friendly, and chatting felt normal and safe. We talked like that for about a week. One night we traded stories about cheap headphones. The next day he stopped replying. No wave, no reason, just gone. I shrugged it off because that is how the app works. People vanish for nothing. For 2 days I filled the gap with cold walks to the river after work, passing murals and closed warehouses. I only thought about Mark when one of his songs drifted back into my head. That steady low noise you feel more than hear, until he messaged again with an apology and a new plan for Saturday. He said rehearsal had melted into a deadline, and he wanted to make it up to me by inviting me to a birthday party for one of his housemates. He said they all worked in the recording scene and rented an old mansion with a big porch and a backyard. There would be a grill, some live music, people from 2 small studios, and maybe a few neighbors. The way he wrote about it matched the city in my head. Old house, creative roommates, indie jobs. It sounded believable enough to consider, not a wild risk on a first meeting. I told him I preferred first meetings outdoors and asked to stay outside near the gate. He agreed right away. He said the party would be in the backyard with lights strung up, barbecue, guitars, and a small speaker. He sent a picture of a dented thrift store grill. He also said he would meet me at the light rail station so I would not have to walk alone. I said that worked for me, and that I might only stay an hour. He sent a thumbs up and a joke about saving me a plate near the band if needed. All week, I kept the plan basic in my head. Meet at the station, walk together, stay by the fence near the street, leave before the last train. I picked a jacket with deep pockets and boots with good soles because sidewalks there bulge with roots. I saved the address he gave me and looked at the map once to set the cross street. I charged my phone, packed a small umbrella, and texted a friend the time and place. Then I tried to sleep early, but the building was noisy and the rain kept tapping on the thin window. Saturday was damp and cold, that thin kind of rain that settles on sleeves without turning into drops. The train car smelled like wet coats and tired brakes. I stood near the door with one earbud in and watched the fogged glass clear at each stop. When my station came up, I got off and checked both ends of the platform. It was pretty empty, just a couple with a backpack and a guy with a bike. Mark was not there. I checked the time and waited 5 minutes. Then a message appeared on my screen from him. Running late. He wrote that rehearsal was running late and asked me to walk to the house alone, that someone would let me through the side gate. He sent the address again with a little map pin and said it was only 3 blocks. He added, "I'll come straight out when I get there." I read it twice. I did not like walking to a house I had never seen, but the neighborhood had bars, a corner store, and late buses. I told myself I could turn around if anything felt wrong, put my phone away, and started walking under the lights. The sidewalks were slick with moss and patchy repairs. Old trees leaned over the road. The houses were a mix of fixed up and tired, porches with chipped paint, yard chairs stacked for rain. I passed a fence covered in band posters and a blue bin overflowing with beer cans. Somewhere a dog barked steady and then went quiet. I kept the number in my head and counted the blocks. At the corner I saw string lights hanging over a side yard, dark now, and a row of plastic tables below them. The house sat back behind a low brick wall. I stopped near the gate and texted him that I was outside. The porch light was on, but the windows were dark. I heard music from somewhere, a bass line, hard to place. A car rolled by slow and then sped up at the stop sign. I stayed near the sidewalk like I said I would, and did not touch the gate. The typing bubble started and stopped. After a minute, I heard quick footsteps on gravel. A figure rounded the corner, stepped under the porch bulb, and it was Mark, maybe 10 years older, gaunt, and smelling of marijuana. When we reached the house, I reminded him I wanted to stay outside. He stopped at the side gate and shook his head, said the passage was blocked with lumber and paint cans. He pointed to a tarp and a stack of cinder blocks leaning into the path. "We have to cut through the house," he said, already moving toward the porch. The porch boards were wet and soft under my boots. He opened the door like he lived there, waved me in, and stepped behind me. As soon as I crossed the threshold, he swung the door shut and started turning locks. I counted 3 deadbolts, 1 chain, and a knob. Metal clicked in quick sequence. The sound was tight in the small entry. I looked at the hallway. The place did not match his vibe at all. No posters, no cables, no scuffed gear cases. It looked like a catalog home, stiff and expensive, with a mirror in a carved frame and a long runner on the floor that had no stains. He smiled like a host and said he would give me a quick tour. He moved room to room, talking about renovations and hard work, and finally affording this. He ran his hand across a glass coffee table and named a furniture store. The couch was beige and squared, not thrifted or worn. A lamp had a brass base and a clean shade. Every room smelled faintly like lemon cleaner, not sweat, not music. We reached the kitchen. It was big and white, with heavy bar stools and a bowl of fruit that looked staged. I went to the window and looked out over the yard. No lights, no tables, no people. The grass was wet and empty. I could see the dark grill cover pulled tight and untouched. I waited a beat and asked where the party was. He came beside me and said guests were stuck, buses were slow, a ride-share mix-up. He talked fast and shrugged like it was nothing. He kept moving me along, pointing at a framed photo of a coastline, showing off a pantry with labeled jars. He opened a door and said the recording setup was downstairs. I paused at the top step and said I could wait for the others in the yard when they arrived. He reminded me the side passage was blocked and gave a short laugh, said, 2 minutes. It's worth it. His hand hovered above my back but did not touch me. I started down the stairs. The basement smelled like dust and old heat. One bare bulb lit a space with a low ceiling and painted concrete floor. There was an old couch with sagging cushions, a small TV on a stand, and a cheap folding table. I saw a mic stand with no mic and a pair of headphones in a plastic bin. No racks, no foam, nothing that matched his bragging. In the far corner stood a heavy metal door with a big handle and scuffed paint. He walked to the door and grabbed the handle. "This is the soundproof room," he said. He pulled it open with a grunt. The hinges were stiff. He flipped on a switch inside. The room was small and boxy. I saw 2 guitars, a stool, and mattresses leaning and strapped to the walls, another one across the floor like a pad. No windows, no cables. The air did not move. He stepped inside and clapped his hands, smiled at the dull sound. "Come in and tell me how the acoustics feel," he said. He gestured deeper, past the threshold. Every part of me tightened. I stayed at the doorframe and looked down at the mattress on the floor. I gave a small laugh and said I would rather go upstairs and wait in the living room for the others, keep an eye on the front. I said maybe we could grab drinks so we had something to bring to the yard when people came. He watched my face, then nodded. We went back up. He moved slower now, quiet on the stairs. In the living room, I stood near the window and checked the street for lights and movement. Cars passed once in a while and splashed water into the gutter. I said a store run made sense, maybe chips and soda and charcoal if needed. I pulled my jacket zipper up to my collar and held my phone in my hand. He lifted his keys from a bowl and said, "Sure, corner market is 2 blocks." We left by the front door. He turned the locks again as we went out, one after another, and pulled the door hard to test it. The rain picked up to a steady mist. We walked side by side along cracked sidewalks and over roots. He made small talk about bands I did not know. I gave short answers and kept pace with a couple walking a dog ahead of us, just close enough to feel like part of a line. The market was bright and loud, with a refrigerator hum and a bell that rang when the door opened. He grabbed a basket and started loading a few random things: a bag of ice, paper plates, a bottle of cheap wine. I pointed across the street to a pharmacy and said I needed something quick. I would be right back. He could pay and wait for me by the window. He said, "Okay," and rolled his shoulders like he was cold. I crossed at the light and went inside. The pharmacy was warmer and bigger. A security camera screen showed small boxes moving in black and white. I walked the aisles without picking anything up and kept my head down. When I reached the end cap, I looked through the front window. Mark stood outside the market under the awning, the basket at his feet. He watched the door of the pharmacy and then checked his phone and then the door again. He kept his hood up and his chin down. I moved to a different aisle and slowed my steps, trying to think. A woman pushed a cart past me, and her kid dragged a hand along the boxes. A group of 3 people in coats headed toward the registers with bottled water and snacks. I followed them at a distance. My heart thumped high in my throat. At the doors, the group walked out into the wet air and opened an umbrella. I walked out right behind them. I raised my voice so it would carry on the street and said, "I'm leaving. Don't follow me." The group turned and looked at me, then at him. Mark's eyes went wide for a second. His mouth tightened. He stood still, then bent to pick up the basket. Rain hit the awning in a soft line. A bus pulled up and hissed. He looked at the group and then at me again. He finally turned away and walked down the block with his head low, carrying the basket back inside. I stayed near the people and waited for the bus doors to close and leave. I watched the corner until he did not reappear. Then I thanked the group and started walking toward the train, keeping to open light and other feet. I did not look back at the house when the train rolled by that neighborhood. At home, my studio felt even smaller, walls damp with heat. I locked my door and sat by the window and checked the app. Mark's profile was gone. No name, no age, nothing in my messages but mine. I set my phone down and held my keys. I stared at the blank screen until my eyes hurt. I kept the jacket on and listened to the pipes in the wall. For a long time I told myself it was just a creepy night, nothing else. But I know I will never know what would have happened if I had stepped inside that soundproof room. It happened last March on a Wednesday morning when I worked from home and borrowed Rachel's laptop because my dev machine was in the office. Our place on South Lamar felt quiet, just the AC humming and the drip from the kitchen faucet. I set her silver MacBook on the dining table next to my coffee and opened a fresh branch on a bug ticket. I signed into my email, pushed a small fix, and then went looking for a PDF I'd saved the week before. Her desktop was messy. Folders with names like Q21 Plan and Marketing Push covered the screen. I clicked a folder named Work Backup, thinking it might hold the PDF. Inside was another folder called DS. My brain read it as Designs, and I clicked. It wasn't Designs. It was a stack of emails exported as .eml, a spreadsheet of deliverables, and a zip labeled techflowncore.zip. The emails mentioned Data Stream Corp. Subject lines like Tonight's Drop, Pricing Doc, and Roadmap V5. There were wireframes that matched what we were building. There were timelines that matched our stand-ups. I opened techflowncore.zip and saw directories I knew by heart. Streamworker, Cache Layer, Rules. Inside Rules, there were files with my comments still in them. Same function names. Same rough edges I kept meaning to refactor. It was our code, pulled out of my repo and tidied enough to pass as theirs. One email said, next upload by Friday, code review by DM. There was also a PDF called Comp Plan. It promised a bonus upon launch. Another folder held chat exports. Rachel and David Miller chatted like old friends. He was the vice president at DataStream. Their messages mixed work and travel. Send the comparison sheet tonight. Then a photo of the Bellagio fountain. Missed you at the gate. Then, VP Marketing, post close. There were hotel receipts, boarding passes, a selfie of Rachel in a conference room I had only seen on LinkedIn posts. I checked the dates. It had been going on for months. She used cloud shares and late-night email drops. She named files like Draft and V2 and sent them from our couch while we watched shows. I read a message where David told her, "You'll have a real team here." She replied, "TechFlow will never get me there." I stared at the screen a long time and took screenshots of everything. Finder windows, email headers, the zip tree. I copied it all to a thumb drive and a private folder in my own cloud. When she got home that evening, I asked her straight. I didn't raise my voice. I showed her one email and the zip list. She looked at it, set her bag down, and shrugged like it was an old plan getting recycled. "David offered me better opportunities than our startup ever could," she said. No denial, no apology. She brushed past me to the bedroom like I had asked about dinner. I sat at the table, stared at the coffee ring under my mug, and made a list of what she still had access to. Staging keys, sprint boards, a vendor account. I removed what I could and changed passwords where I had the right. I saved logs. I backed up my notes. I watched the cursor blink and felt the whole apartment shrink around the screen. I didn't sleep. At 8 a.m., I sent our CEO, Mark Stevens, a calendar invite with no subject, and then walked into his glass office with a USB and a folder of printouts. I told him what I found, when I found it, and how long the dates went back. I showed him the emails to David Miller, the attachments, the code overlap, and the comp plan. Mark called legal and HR into the room. Nobody raised their voice. We sat with a log of file names, commit hashes, and dates. I sent him my cloud folder link and left the evidence with legal. Then I went back to my desk and pushed a small hotfix because the site didn't care about my life. Rachel was fired within a week, badge deactivated. HR escorted her out while I sat at my desk and pretended to write unit tests. She didn't look at me when she passed. By then, it didn't matter. DataStream shipped a feature set we had teased for Q2, and they did it first. Their press release hit the trades on a Monday morning. Our sales pipeline froze. Partners called to reassess timing. The algorithms Rachel fed them matched ours enough to make demos look old. We missed revenue targets by a mile. Then the layoffs came. Half the staff. Whole teams disappeared in one afternoon. I watched people pack little plants into boxes and carry out framed kid photos. 2 of my closest friends got cut. One had a newborn. One had a mortgage that still smelled like paint. I walked them to the parking lot and loaded monitors into trunks, because nobody can lift with a broken heart and a cardboard box. The office went quiet after that. Desks empty. Slack avatars grayed out. I kept thinking about the function names in that zip. I kept thinking about a stripe of comments I wrote at 2 a.m. showing up in a competitor's demo. I wanted complete justice, something I could actually do. So I found a way to contact David's wife, Sandra. She was a financial consultant. She had no idea. I wrote her a short email from my personal account and attached screenshots of the romantic messages and photos from the trips. I did not add anything extra. Just dates, names, and attachments. I sent it late at night and closed the laptop. She replied within a day. "Thank you," she wrote. We spoke once by phone. Calm voice, clipped words. She had questions about travel dates and whether Rachel had been in Austin on the nights she had thought David was. I gave the times I could verify and told her I would send the rest if I found it. She said, "I appreciate your honesty." There was no anger on the call, just steps. She asked for copies in a shared folder. I uploaded everything. Sandra filed for divorce immediately. She demanded half of David's assets, including his stake in DataStream. I heard it from a mutual contact who handled benefits and had heard the office gossip. That same week, David stopped posting his thought leadership threads. His name was missing from a panel he had been scheduled to sit on. I kept my head down at my desk and fixed bugs and watched new badge photos pop up in Slack as cheaper replacements arrived from a staffing firm. I felt satisfied knowing that the cheaters were finally getting what they deserved after destroying so many lives. The idea of David losing everything he'd worked for gave me the same satisfaction I imagined he felt when stealing our company's future. In May, I found out Rachel was still involved with DataStream, even after the cease and desist letters and the HR meetings. A former coworker told me she was consulting off the books, sending small updates through a private email with a fake domain that pointed to a throwaway inbox. I checked social media and saw a tagged photo from a bar in Nashville, a blurred background with a neon sign and David's hand on the edge of the frame. They looked like coworkers at a happy hour if you didn't know where to look. I knew where to look. I saved everything again, names and timestamps, and made a new folder with May dates. I started gathering more proof the way a developer handles a bug that keeps reappearing. I went through hotel check-ins, travel receipts, geotags, and public posts that crossed their schedules. I found a short video from Broadway in Nashville. Rachel laughed at something off camera. In the reflection of a window behind her, David's face looked down at his phone. It was small, but it was enough. I copied screenshots, watermarked my copies so the chain would be clear, and kept the originals on a drive separate from everything else. David wasn't leaving his wife. He wasn't leaving Rachel either. He told each one what they needed to hear to keep his life intact. That sort of double path made sense for a person like him. He wanted stability at home and advantage at work. Rachel wanted rank. It fit the messages. It fit the trips. It fit the way they moved after the first fallout. None of it felt like a surprise by then. It felt like an open tab I hadn't closed. I decided to finish what I started. I emailed Sandra again and told her I had new material. I sent the Nashville photos and a short list of dates they matched. I kept my note short and factual. No extra words. She wrote back, "Got it," and asked if there was more. I told her I would send anything else that could be verified. 5 minutes later, she asked me to send it all to a private folder she controlled. I uploaded everything and signed out. I also contacted a journalist at the Austin Business Journal who covered corporate messes and tech collapses. We met in a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. I showed him the evidence chain on my laptop, the overlapping code, the messages, the timeline, and the new consulting proof. He recorded the interview with his phone and took notes with a pen. He said he had sources at DataStream who had talked about aggressive acquisition of IP. He said this fit a pattern he had been chasing for a year. The article got scheduled for the following week. He said the editors wanted it on the front page of the site for the Monday news cycle, with a print follow-up. He told me legal had cleared the material I provided. He told me federal attention might follow. He said, "This will open a lot of doors and close a few, but it will be clean." I walked out to the street and looked at the slow traffic and tried to think about anything else. I couldn't. I pictured David's name in a headline and Rachel's title next to it. I pictured their inboxes filling up with the same kind of panic our office had felt. I felt like I was finally getting the revenge I deserved after they blew up our roadmap and my life at the same time. It wasn't even anger by then. It was steps, file names, dates. A process that had a start and an end, like a migration script that runs and logs each change until it says, "Done." The day before the article was supposed to publish, Sandra drove to DataStream's office on Congress Avenue. The building had a glass lobby and a security desk, where I had once picked up a visitor badge for a meetup. She didn't check in for a badge. She walked straight in with a gun in her bag. David and Rachel were in a conference room on the 8th floor, a room with a long table and a view of the river. They were in a meeting when Sandra opened the door. She shot them both. It was fast. People in nearby rooms said they heard 3 cracks and then glass hitting the floor. David fell against the chair and slid down. Rachel dropped near the end of the table. The building went into lockdown. Alarms chirped. Someone pulled people into the stairwell. Sandra walked back out, took the elevator to the lobby, and kept walking to the parking lot. She sat in her car, put the gun under her chin, and ended it. Police arrived with lights still spinning in daylight. The tape went up around the entrance. News vans showed up before lunch. They found printouts in Sandra's car, emails, photos, screenshots, all the things I had sent. There was a short letter on the passenger seat. It mentioned betrayal and a life cut apart. It had the dates lined up like a ledger. The investigation pulled at every thread. It came out that Sandra had been struggling since her mother died. She had started on strong antidepressants a few weeks before. Her doctor had adjusted the dose once. Side effects were listed in a folder in her glove box. Nobody in my orbit knew that part. I didn't know that part when I sent the Nashville photos. I kept thinking about the folder in her glove box and the printouts. I kept thinking about how a chain of files can push a person toward a decision, even if you never meant it that way. The journalist called me that night and said he was not publishing. He said it wasn't a story anymore, it was a crime scene, and he wouldn't be part of making it worse. Detectives called me the next morning and asked me to come in. I sat in a small room with cinder block walls and a camera in the corner. They asked me to walk through the timeline again. When I found the evidence. When I contacted Sandra. What I said. What I sent. I answered the questions. I gave them access to the folder and my phone. I wasn't a suspect, but I was a link. I told myself I didn't pull the trigger. I told myself I did what any employee would do if they saw their work stolen and their life crushed by it. The words didn't do much. They felt like lines in a unit test that always returned false. 4 months have passed. I still wake up at 3 a.m. and look at the ceiling like I'm waiting for an alert to fire. People know I expose the espionage. They don't say anything to my face, but they move around me like I carry static. A few friends text, then stop. Most avoid me in person. I understand it. There's no simple conversation for this. TechFlow never recovered. We shut down in August. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. The subject said, "Final notice." We lined up for boxes again. This time there was no coming back. I took my keyboard and a photo from a team off-site I didn't even remember liking at the time. I walked out with a few others who didn't look at each other. Out in the heat, the building looked empty even before they turned the servers off. I can't get a job in Austin. Recruiters take calls and then go quiet. I hear, "We went another direction," a lot. I see my name in their eyes when they connect me to the data stream story, even though the article never ran. My inbox stays clean except for spam. My bank balance slides down a little more every week. I've cut back to basics. Rice and eggs, rent, my laptop. That's it. I get messages from burner accounts. They tell me to watch my back. They call me names I won't repeat. Some claim to be relatives. Some are obvious fakes. I report them when I can, then block and move on. I change passwords again. I check the peephole when someone knocks. I keep a cheap camera pointed at the front door just in case. I looked at jobs in other cities. I thought about changing careers, maybe contracting under a different name, or something outside tech where nobody cares about a launch that never happened. But I'm not sure it matters. The story moves with me, even if I move. It sits in searches. It sits in the way people ask where I used to work and why I left. Every time there's a headline about workplace violence or corporate scandals, I read the comments and wait to see my own situation mirrored back. I close the tab and tell myself I had the right to expose a crime. I tell myself I took the proper steps. I reported first. I didn't hide it. Then I think about the folder in Sandra's glove box and the glass on the conference room floor. I didn't know her breaking point. I didn't even think to ask if there was one. The question that stays with me is simple and sharp. Was my need for justice worth 3 human lives? I don't have the answer. When I was 16, I wanted to be a model. I knew I was only 5'2". I had no real photos or runway walk. It didn't matter. I was a Latina girl from a small town, and I thought the internet could make it possible. My mom, Maria, never laughed at me. She said, "Try, but be careful." She drove me to a mall photographer for a cheap portfolio. We sent it to an agency in Los Angeles. They were polite and then quiet. Their clients wanted taller girls. So I went online. I made a profile on a site for beginners and posted simple pictures in jeans and a white tank top. I wrote that a parent would come with me. Messages came fast. Some were creepy. A few looked real. One photographer stood out. His note was short, with a link to a small site and a studio address in Santa Barbara. He said he'd pay me and cover gas. He said the theme was fresh face beauty, no swimwear, and that a parent must attend. He sent a Saturday and a time. "We'll keep it professional," he wrote. I showed my mom everything. We checked the map. It was about 4 hours each way. She rubbed her forehead and said we could go. Maria agreed to drive, but only if my dad and my little brother came too. I didn't love that. It sounded childish. But I was 16. I didn't argue. We picked a date. My dad cleaned the car. My brother packed chips. My mom packed my outfits: jeans, plain tees, a sundress, sneakers, flats. She wrote the address on paper, even with GPS. We left before sunrise. The freeway was empty. I scrolled the photographer's site in the back seat. My mom asked if I ate. My dad said he would wait outside the studio the whole time and we'd leave if anything felt wrong. I brought a small makeup bag. I told myself the nerves were normal. Santa Barbara looked clean and expensive. We got off near the edge of town, where the houses spread out. The GPS led us past a golf course into a neighborhood with tall trees and high fences. The address matched a big house with a gated driveway. No business sign. Cream walls. Dark roof. Hedges cut in straight lines. Off to one side was a separate garage converted into a studio, bigger than our home. We stopped at the gate's call box. My mom pressed the button. A woman's voice answered like she was in our car. "Hello?" My mom gave our names and time. The gate slid open slow. We drove in past a dry fountain. The studio door had a keypad and a new lock. It looked like a place where sound wouldn't get out. We parked in a guest spot. My dad stretched and scanned the fence line, the windows, the roof. My brother pointed at a lemon tree. My mom told him no. The front door opened before we could knock. A woman waved from inside, mid-40s, attractive, neat hair, gold necklace, jeans, and a blouse. She smiled like we were family. "Welcome," she said. Inside, the air was cold. The entry mirror was so clean it looked like a hole. She led us into a living room with white couches and a big rug. Coffee table books sat in a perfect square. A glass bowl held green apples. I sat on the edge of the couch. My mom kept my garment bag on her lap. Framed art on the walls, but no family photos. Everything looked staged. She told us she was the photographer's wife. He was finishing in the studio and would be in soon. She offered water. My dad said yes and didn't drink it. My brother asked for Wi-Fi. She gave him the guest password from a small card. I heard a low hum somewhere, maybe air or equipment. She sat very straight with her hands folded. We talked about the drive. She asked about my school and said their studio did a lot of lifestyle work. She said I had a good look for catalogs. Her eyes kept measuring my face. I sat taller. I felt the rug under my thin shoes. The glass table had sharp corners. When she smiled, the corners of her mouth barely moved. After a few minutes, she said we could see the studio, then stopped and said we should wait for her husband. He liked to explain his gear himself. My dad said waiting was fine. He looked down the hallway that led deeper into the house. A clock ticked softly. The whole place smelled like lemon cleaner, not food or pets. I wondered if other girls sat here and didn't breathe much. Time moved slow. My mom checked the time and her phone. The wife glanced at the front window like she expected a delivery. A heavy door closed somewhere out back, the way a trunk shuts. My dad turned his head at the sound. She didn't react. She asked if I brought flats. I nodded and touched the bag on my mom's hands. Somewhere a mower started and then cut off, like someone changed their mind. My brother sank into the couch and went quiet. My dad stood and walked 2 steps, then sat again. I noticed a camera above the entry and another by the hall. The studio door outside stayed shut. I rubbed my wrists and tried not to fidget. The wife checked her watch without meaning to. A phone buzzed on a counter and stopped. Nobody moved toward it. It felt too quiet. I looked at the doorway and saw a shadow cross the hall. Footsteps got closer, steady like a metronome. I pressed my hands together to keep my legs from bouncing. The wife stood as the steps entered the room. The husband appeared. An ordinary-looking man about 45. Nothing remarkable about him. His wife kept moving around the living room with a laundry basket. She folded shirts on the arm of a chair, paired small socks, smoothed dresses with her palm. I noticed tiny leggings with unicorns and a t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur. There were no kids' voices, no toys, no school photos on the walls. She never mentioned children. She smiled and set a neat stack on a shelf, then picked up more, like it was the most normal thing. The photographer asked us to follow him to his office for paperwork. The office smelled like printer ink. There was a wide desk with 2 monitors, a laser printer, a tray of forms with tabs, and a metal stapler. He gave my mom a W-9 and a release, then a separate contract for me. He used a black pen and wrote my legal name, date of birth, and rate. He explained usage rights in a calm voice. Everything looked standard. He asked me to sign and initial several places. My dad read each paragraph. The only strange part was a line where he asked if I wanted to use a pseudonym. He said some models prefer that for branding. I was 16. I didn't see why I would need a stage name for basic photos. I said no. He nodded like it was nothing. When we finished, he led us out back to the converted garage. The studio was clean and cold, with floor-to-ceiling backdrops on a rail, seamless paper in white and gray, racks of plain clothes and accessories in plastic sleeves, and a table with clips, lint rollers, hairpins. 2 soft boxes stood on heavy stands. A boom arm hung overhead with a light and a big diffuser. A laptop was tethered to a camera on a tripod. Another camera sat on a shelf with a long lens. It looked like a real studio where people did real work. For a second, I felt proud just to be there. He told me to change into what I brought first, simple jeans and a tee, and we'd start on the white backdrop. I changed in a small dressing corner behind a folding screen. The floor was swept. There was a full-length mirror and a stool. I could hear the low whir of a fan and the click of the tripod. My hands shook when I tied my hair back. My only modeling before this was my older sister taking pictures on her phone next to our back fence. I stepped out, and he smiled in a quick way and raised his hands like a frame. He looked at my family and said, "Teenagers usually get shy when relatives are watching the shoot. Could you wait outside?" It sounded reasonable. My dad looked at me. I nodded. He put a hand on my shoulder and said in Spanish, "Si algo va mal, grita. Estamos aquí mismo." They moved just outside the studio door, still on the property, by the lemon tree. I could see a slice of sunlight through the open side door. The photographer closed the interior door to the house and turned the key part way, like to block drafts. He started with simple poses. Chin down. Look here. Relax your hands. He adjusted the soft boxes, stepped close to move a loose piece of hair, then stepped back. After a few shots, he said, "You can pull down your collar a little. If something extra gets in the frame, I'll remove it during editing." He said it casual, like weather talk. My skin crawled. I tugged the shirt up instead. He wasn't angry. He just changed angles. He told me to turn my hips. More curve, he said softly. The light felt hotter. I could hear my dad's shoes scuff outside when he shifted his weight. I asked for a break. My voice sounded too small to me, but he heard me and lowered the camera. He walked to the laptop and said we could review. He scrolled through thumbnails. The images looked flat and grainy. The focus was soft. My sister got sharper pictures on her phone in noon sun. The compositions were odd, my face cut in half, the frame drifting down my chest. He said, "First round is just to warm up." He looked at me and asked if I was ready to continue. I said I needed to check with my parents. He clicked his tongue like he remembered something and nodded. He said, "Of course." He unplugged the tether cable and set the camera on the tripod head. He didn't open the door. I did. The air outside felt different. My mom stood up right away when she saw my face. I leaned toward her and said I wanted to leave right now. No story. No extra words. She didn't ask why. She put her hand on my back and said, "We have a long drive." She looked over my shoulder and told the photographer we'd have to cut it short. He held his hands up a little and said he understood. He didn't argue. He asked if we wanted to reschedule. My mom said no, maybe another time, but her voice was already moving away. We packed fast. I changed back into my jeans behind the screen with shaking fingers. I heard the wife in the house, walking somewhere, drawers sliding, a washing machine beeping. My dad carried my bag. My brother put the chips in the car. The photographer walked us to the edge of the studio and stopped. He didn't open the gate. The wife appeared by the front door with the same small smile. "Drive safe," she said. The gate slid open. We drove out. No one waved. In the car, nobody talked. My mom watched the road with both hands tight on the wheel. My dad kept checking the mirrors. My brother picked at the label on his water bottle until it shredded. I stared at the paper with the address until the letters blurred. The freeway signs rolled past in green slabs. We didn't stop for food. The silence made the hours shorter. Later that week, my brother told me something I didn't know. While I was shooting, he got bored and tried the studio door to peek in. The knob turned, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked from inside. He said he knocked 2 times, and nobody answered. He stepped back when he heard my dad's shoes and pretended he was on his phone. I thought about that too long. The door in that place had a keypad and a hard lock. He could choose who came in and who didn't. 2 years passed. I wasn't trying to model anymore. I was at work when I clicked a link a friend sent me. It was a local news piece about a Santa Barbara photographer who had been arrested. The mugshot looked like the man who told me to pull down your collar a little. The article said he created and distributed sexual materials involving minors. He ran a paid website disguised as artistic photography. The sample screenshots in the story had underage girls in swimsuits and provocative poses, all tagged with stage names. The pseudonym line on his forms made sudden sense. The wife's calm routines, the big house, the perfect gear, the staged rooms, the children's clothes with no children around. It all lined up like he practiced it. I showed my mom the link that night. She read every line twice, and then closed her eyes for a second like she was listening for a noise. We didn't talk about it much. There wasn't anything to add. We were already safe. I think about the door and the voice he used. I think about how fast my mom moved when I said I wanted to leave. I'm grateful she didn't argue or ask for one more set or try to be polite. I'm glad my dad's shoes stayed by the door. We trusted the feeling and we left. When I was 14, I lived with my mom and my little brother in a rented one-story house in a working-class neighborhood in Nevada. Our street was sun-bleached during the day and louder at night when the swamp cooler groaned and dogs barked. We had a small yard with a chain-link fence, a cracked driveway, and a bathroom window that never closed right unless you shoved the latch with a butter knife. Mom worked double shifts at the plant off the highway, so after school it was just us, locking the door, heating leftovers, and finishing homework at kitchen table. That summer, a guy moved in next door. He told us his name was Ray. He was skinny with a long neck and a faded baseball cap. He waved from his porch and offered to help trim our weeds or fix the sagging gate. He said he knew a cheap way to patch a porch light that flickered. He leaned on the chain link and talked about the heat and rent. He seemed friendly, always smiling, but his eyes looked tired. We didn't know him, just another renter passing through, or that's what we thought. He kept to himself mostly anyway. Our routine barely changed. We kicked off our shoes by the door, opened the fridge, and argued about leftovers. We kept a tablet on the kitchen table to watch videos while we ate. The charger sat plugged in behind the salt and pepper. One Thursday after school, I put my backpack down and reached for the tablet without looking. My hand hit empty wood. I froze. The charging cord lay there like a dead tail. The tablet was gone. I thought my brother had moved it. He shook his head. We checked under the mail pile. The tablet was gone. Something felt wrong in the room. We walked the house slowly, touching nothing. Nothing looked smashed. The back door was still locked. The sliding glass door stuck like always. In my room, my headphones were missing from the dresser. The zipper pouch in my backpack felt too light. In Mom's room, her top drawer was pulled out an inch. Her small jewelry box sat at a new angle. In the bathroom, the window over the tub was open a few inches for air. The plastic latch was bent like someone forced it. On the bath mat was a half shoe print in gray dust. Just sitting there. I called Mom at the plant. She came home early, still in her hairnet and work shirt. She checked her purse and said cash was missing, small bills she kept for gas. She backed out of the bedroom without touching anything and told us to wait on the porch. She dialed 911 from the kitchen. The first officer had a sunburned neck and a short-sleeve uniform. He shined a small flashlight across the sill and tile. A second officer wrote in a notebook at the table and asked what was missing. They focused on the bathroom window and the latch. They checked the yard, the alley, and the fence line for footprints. They dusted the window frame, the jewelry dish, and a couple of doorknobs with black powder from a little jar. The officer said not to get our hopes up about prints. He said whoever did this slipped in fast through the bathroom, took easy stuff to pawn, and left the same way. He told Mom to put a dowel in the slider and get a better window latch. After they left, the house felt smaller, louder, and strange, like it was holding its breath with us inside. The officers suspected local drug addicts who hit houses for quick cash between fixes. They said they would increase patrols in our area for a while, and told Mom to think about an alarm system, even a cheap one with a loud siren. The next day was an early release at school, so I got home around 2. The sun sat hard over the street. My brother had stayed for tutoring because he was behind in algebra. My cousin had gone with her aunt to a doctor's appointment. I unlocked door and stepped into the kind of quiet that listens. The note by the switch still read, "Lock windows." The bowl of keys sat on the counter with the same dented keychains. I walked the short hallway and checked the bathroom window out of habit. It was shut and latched tight. I dropped my backpack by the couch and sat where I could see the front door and the little entryway. I opened a mobile game to pass time until Mom called. A delivery truck hissed at the corner and moved on. Then a floorboard creaked from the hallway, the long board near the front we all knew by heart. I stayed still and listened. Another creak came from near the front door, the kind wood makes when weight shifts. I put my phone face down on my knee. Dust hung in a strip of light between the curtains. I stood up slow. I looked at closet by the front door, the narrow one where we kept the vacuum, the mop, and winter coats nobody needed in June. The door was shut. A metallic click came from inside, like a hanger bumping the knob. My brain counted people. Brother at tutoring, cousin with her aunt, mom at work, door locked. The closet knob turned a fraction, then stopped. The door opened slow, almost polite, and a shadow edged out first. Then a man stepped into the living room light, leaning forward like he was bracing for a fall. It was Ray. He had been inside the closet by our front door. Up close, he looked wrecked, cheeks sunken, eyes bloodshot with red threads, collar dark with sweat. His cap was gone, his belt bent inward on itself. His hands twitched and shook, fingers vibrating like they belonged to somebody else, shaking like he had a fever right there in front. His age was hard to tell because of how sick he looked, but I knew he was around 30 from the day he moved in. For a few seconds we stared at each other like the room was frozen. He looked past me, toward the hallway, like he'd expected an empty house and a quiet path to the bathroom window. Then he smiled in a wrong way, thin and slow, like he was practicing. He stepped closer with small shuffling steps. I stayed on the couch cushion and didn't move. His shoulders were narrow under a dirty t-shirt. His breath smelled like old smoke and sour coffee. His fingers opened and closed like he was warming them. Then he reached out and grabbed my shoulders. His hands were hard and bony. He leaned in until I could see a red scratch on his jaw. "You're such a pretty little thing," he whispered. His voice sounded dry, like paper rubbing. I tried to twist away, but he tightened his grip, and my back hit the cushion seam. The room went very small around his face. I looked at the path to the door. It was 3 steps to the entry, then 2 more to the latch. His thumbs pressed down into my collarbone. I let every muscle fall loose. I dropped like my bones were gone. His hands slipped up toward my neck as my body went slack, and I slid off the couch to the rug. The shock made him ease up for a second, just enough. He bent down fast to get a better hold on my arm. I pushed my palms into the carpet and drew my knees in tight under me. While his head dipped, I kicked upward with everything I had, aiming between his legs. My heel connected hard. A dry thud hit the room, then a wet groan came out of him. His face folded and his mouth opened with no sound for a second. His grip broke. His fingers scraped at the fabric of my sleeve before they let go completely. He dropped to one knee and grabbed the edge of the coffee table. He made a small choking sound and tried to stand. I got to my feet, stumbled on the rug edge, and caught the door frame with my hand. He reached toward my ankle, missed, and swore under his breath. His eyes watered. I turned the deadbolt with my thumb, yanked the door open so hard it bounced, and ran. The hot air hit my face like a blast from an oven. My phone was still on the couch. I sprinted in socks down our walkway, then over the hot sidewalk to the street. The Johnson house sat 4 doors down with a blue mailbox and a plastic flamingo in the dirt strip by the curb. Their front door was open to the screen. I cut across their grass and hit the bell 3 times. Mrs. Johnson came fast, saw my face, and unlatched the screen. I stepped in and said my neighbor was in our house. She grabbed her cordless phone and dialed. She spoke clear, then gave our address, and then called my mom. She told me to sit on a kitchen chair and keep breathing. I stood instead and looked through their screen at our house. The front door hung open like a mouth. A minute later, I saw movement inside. Then nothing. Mrs. Johnson told me to stay put and locked her screen from the inside. The first patrol car turned onto our street in under 5 minutes. The officer went straight to our open door, hand on his holster, and called out. A second car came in behind him, and a third a few minutes later. They cleared the house room by room. One of them shouted "clear," and another closed the door. They came back with a small plastic bag of items they found in a kitchen drawer that weren't ours. Ray was gone. He had taken more small things on his way out, like he couldn't help himself. A pair of earbuds, the roll of quarters from the cabinet, 2 video games from the TV stand. The officers took notes, then canvassed the block. One officer asked Mrs. Johnson for her statement, and she told him exactly what I'd said to her. They asked if there were cameras on the street. There weren't. That same afternoon they found him. A unit stopped him at a pawn shop 2 miles away. He was trying to sell our tablet and a handful of jewelry. The clerk had already called it in because the serial number on the tablet matched the case the officers put out. They brought him in, and he started talking fast, like a dam broke. He said he needed cash, and everything hurt all the time. They said he was a longtime heroin addict who bounced between construction jobs and short leases. He admitted he had been watching our house for weeks. He knew when the plant shift started. He knew our Thursday early release. He had sat on his step with a soda can and watched who went in and out of our door. He knew about the bathroom window that stuck, and the way our car sounded at the corner. The detective who came by in the evening wore a plain polo and carried a folder. He said the story got worse. Ray had taken our spare key once, the one we kept under the doormat when we first moved in. He slid it out while pretending to tie his shoe and used a grinder at a friend's place to make a copy. Then he put the original back. He had used the copy to enter 2 other times, slow and quiet. Hearing that made the house feel like a stage built out of cardboard. The detective showed us a photo of a key wrapped in electrical tape that they found in Ray's pocket. He told Mom to change every lock and get a chain for the interior. He said not to leave keys outside again, not even for a day. He asked me to repeat the whole sequence from the moment I heard the floorboard to the moment I ran. At his arraignment, Ray looked smaller under the lights. He kept his eyes down while the list of charges was read. The public defender put a hand on his arm. There was a hearing, then a trial date. I gave a statement in a side room and answered the same questions 3 ways. When it was time, I took the stand for only a few minutes. I described his hands on my shoulders and the words he said in our living room. The prosecutor focused on burglary, unlawful entry, and attempted assault on a minor. The pawn tickets and the items recovered did most of the work. The jury didn't take long. The judge gave him a long sentence based on repeat offenses and the fact that he targeted a child home alone. He stared at the table and nodded once like a person who finally stopped running. The bailiff led him out through a side door. After that night, I didn't sleep in my room for almost a year. I pushed my dresser in front of the door for weeks. I jumped at pipes in the mail slot. Mom installed an alarm system with a loud siren and a bright keypad by the entry. My brother learned to check every latch twice without being asked. We changed the route we walked to school and never posted our schedule anywhere. Time helped some, but I stayed cautious. I checked the closet before I sat down. I watched porches and alleys when I passed them. When I finally moved back into my room, I kept a flashlight on the nightstand and a baseball bat under the bed. I slept with the door cracked and my shoes closed. I carried my phone on me in the house, not on a table, never again. Looking back, I am grateful I went limp and then aimed where it mattered. It wasn't brave. It was the only move I had. The way he studied our street stayed with me the most. He didn't break a window and run. He planned. He learned our hours. He waited for the day when the house looked empty and the latch looked weak. Danger lived next door and watched us like TV. I still think about the creak of that one floorboard and the click of the closet knob. Those sounds sit in my ear when a room goes quiet. I pay attention to small noises and broken latches. I don't leave windows cracked when I leave. I don't keep keys under mats or in fake rocks. Instincts are simple, but they are fast. Sometimes your instincts are all you have to rely on. The whole experience taught me that danger can literally live next door, watching and waiting for the right moment. It was early 2021. I worked nights at a Hampton Inn off Interstate 95, just outside Richmond. I was training a new employee named Jessica, same age as me, for the overnight front desk. Night shifts had their own rhythm. Printers humming, lobby doors hissing, highway noise softened by glass. I knew the checklists by heart, and the rooms by number. I knew which vending machine ate dollar bills, and which ice machine liked to jam. I also knew how long a quiet shift could feel around 4 in the morning, when the building sounded empty and time dragged slow. That night was slow in a way that made the minutes heavy. We finished the deposit drop, balanced folios, printed the audit, and closed out the drawer. The lobby TV glowed on mute with a weather map. It was 3:30 a.m. when I decided to show Jessica the different rooms. Walking the floors helped new hires remember where things were. It filled the hour before breakfast setup and kept us alert. I grabbed the master key and a small flashlight from the drawer. We left the desk, locked the office door, and headed to the elevator. The hallway was quiet. The elevator ride up to the 4th floor was normal. The mirror had a fingerprint smudge I had noticed earlier. The carpet under our shoes was the same brown and blue pattern I had walked 1,000 times. Jessica asked about late checkout rules, and I answered without thinking. When the door slid open on 4, cold air spilled from the corridor. The hallway looked the same as always, with framed stock art and exit signs, thermostats humming, ice alcoves and fire doors. Still, something about it felt off. A weight sat in my chest for no reason that night. There was a lemon cleaner smell mixed with stale air. The vent covers rattled faintly, then steadied. A thin strip of light showed under one door where a guest had left the bathroom on. I had walked this exact stretch more nights than I could count, but my steps were slower. I did not explain it to Jessica. I kept it to myself. My ears felt too open, like they were waiting. The carpet muffled our steps and made the hallway feel longer than it was. The building felt awake in a way I did not like for us both. We turned right toward the end suite. It was the priciest room, with a small sitting area and a whirlpool tub that needed a special switch. It was usually empty at that hour. I planned to show Jessica where the extra blankets were kept in the closet, and how to reset the breaker if the tub switch tripped. The hall was quiet, except for the soft HVAC hum and the distant click of the elevator doors closing. Training was supposed to be simple. We walked side by side, and I kept the master key in my palm the whole time. I noticed the thermostat display near the ice alcove flicker once, then hold steady at 71. A housekeeping door farther down was closed, the metal latch set in its slot. Nothing looked wrong, but the tight feeling stayed. I did not want to spook Jessica over a feeling I could not explain. We kept our pace even and kept our voices down. The carpet had that clean chemical smell that never quite goes away. My hand was damp around the key, and I did not like that detail. I focused on the corner where the suite waited for us. About halfway to the suite, we saw a man standing in the doorway of a room. He was not moving. He stood with the door cracked behind him like he had stepped out and then forgot why. He wore a gray t-shirt clinging to his body from heavy sweat, even though the floor felt cool. His shoulders were hunched and his arms hung loose. He stared down the hallway like he was expecting someone. Even from a distance you could tell something was wrong. He had that tense posture people get when they are under the influence of something. We greeted him the way we were trained. I said, "Good morning, sir. Do you need anything?" Jessica added a small hey. He did not respond. He did not even nod. His eyes definitely followed us. Those eyes were cold and almost unblinking in the hallway light. I felt an instant sense of danger I could not ignore, so I kept moving without speeding up. The elevator was behind us, which meant passing him again to go back. That felt like a bad plan. I kept my head forward and my key tight in my hand as we walked on. When we reached the suite, I slid the key, watched the light, and opened the door. The room opened to a living area, a couch against the wall, a table with 2 chairs, a microwave and sink, and then the bedroom beyond. Everything looked neat and untouched. The bedspread was tight and the TV was off. I stepped inside and closed the door behind us. The latch clicked into place. I stood still and listened. The vent above the kitchenette rattled, then steadied. Through the door I could feel him like heat through drywall, and I did not like it. I turned to Jessica. I kept my voice low. I said, "That guy gives me bad vibes. I do not think we should walk past him again to get back to the elevator." She nodded once. Her hands slid into her pockets and stayed there. I pointed out the tub switch, the breaker panel, and the blanket shelf to make the training look normal. I did not drag it out. We needed a different route. The service stairs were by the linen room and came out near the meeting room on 1. I said, "Let's use the service stairs instead." She nodded, and we left the suite. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The man wasn't in his doorway anymore. He stood in the middle of the corridor, planted, facing us. He didn't talk. He just stared. Sweat had soaked his shirt. The hallway felt narrow. I didn't break stride. He tracked us like he was measuring distance. We aimed for the service stairs at the end. I leaned toward Jessica and whispered, "When we get to the stairwell, take off your shoes. We're going to run down and exit through the back door." She nodded once. We kept walking like nothing was wrong. His head tilted a little, as if he heard my voice. The exit sign glowed above the metal door. I pulled it open, and we slipped into the stairwell. The hinge thumped shut. I locked the handle out of habit. We took off our heels and left them on the landing. The concrete was cold through our socks. "Go," I said. We ran. One hand on the rail. 4 flights. Legs burning. Breath loud. We pushed the bottom door, hit the service corridor, and shoved through the back exit into the parking lot. We ran across the asphalt past the laundry vent and rounded the corner by the dumpsters. The lot was empty except for a few cars under the lights. We cut along the wall to the front entrance. The sliding doors opened. We crossed the lobby and went behind the desk. I keyed us into the administrative office and locked it. I closed the blinds on the window. We stood still and listened. HVAC, ice machine, vending. Nothing else. I slid the bolt and checked the second lock. My hands shook, but I pulled the monitor cart close and woke screens. The cameras came up in a grid. Lobby, hallways, stair landings, exits, the lot, and the back door we used. I rewound the 4th floor feed to the moment the stairwell door shut behind us. He moved as soon as we were gone. He walked toward the door at a steady pace, not fast, not slow. He put his ear to the seam and stayed there. Then he tried the handle. It didn't open. He stood again, shoulders lifted, chin tilted, listening to the shaft. Sweat shone on his face in the frame. Then he turned and headed for the elevator. I switched to the 1st floor landing camera. The feed showed him appear, push into the service corridor, and hit the same exit we had used. The lot camera caught him stepping outside and scanning around. He checked the pavement, the laundry vent, the corners. He walked between cars and around the dumpster enclosure, slow, checking shadows. He didn't look drunk in that footage. He looked alert. We watched him loop the lot twice and pause by the far light. Then he drifted back in through the side door. A minute later, the fourth floor showed his door close again. Quietly. I opened the property system and pulled the in-house list. The occupied room tied to that door number showed a registration for David Johnson. No middle initial. Address in North Carolina. Phone looked prepaid. It read like something filled out fast. I printed the folio and wrote the details into my notebook. We stayed in the office with the door locked the rest of the shift. We watched the screens and finished paperwork. At 5 a.m., the halls were still quiet. I left a note for the manager. Disturbing behavior on 4th. Please review video. Consider blacklist for safety reasons. The sun came up gray through the lobby window. Day shift arrived a little after 6. I unlocked the office, handed over the key binder, and told her we had a weird guy on 4. Jessica didn't add anything. At 7, the maintenance tech came in, and I said the stairwell door on 4 might need a closer adjustment. We clocked out and drove home. Months passed. In March 2022, scrolling Facebook before work, a local station's post hit my feed. Serial killer arrested. Marcus Thompson charged with 4 women's deaths. I tapped it. The photo was him. Exactly. I opened the article. Detectives said he moved along interstates and stayed at motels and budget hotels. They believed he picked victims from lone women travelers and night staff. Sometimes he used dating apps. Sometimes he approached employees on quiet shifts. Bodies had been found near highway pull-offs and service roads. The dates spanned more than a year. The piece said he watched patterns and chose nights with little traffic. It also mentioned aliases under common names. It didn't list David Johnson, but it didn't need to. It fit. I stared at the photo and felt the hallway again. Hard. I looked for anything about the room records and saw a note that he booked under ordinary pairs. That was enough. I remembered our printout and the name. I texted Jessica the link and wrote, "Saw this." She called right away and said, "It's him." We didn't talk long. Later, I learned the manager had pulled our clips and sent them to police when the news broke. Detectives asked for roster logs tied to that date. I did not go back to nights after that. I asked for mornings. I kept to the lobby and stayed near the phone. Always. Sometimes I drive past the exit and see the sign and think about that night. The building is the same shape against the sky. The 4th floor is still up there with the same carpet and framed prints. The difference is how I move. I keep doors between me and long hallways when I can. I watch the cameras before I step out. I don't ignore a feeling. I test bolts twice. I think of Jessica's nod, our bare feet on concrete, and the way he tilted his head like he could hear us. We ran, and we kept running. I'm 30 now, but this happened 4 years ago in Phoenix when I was 26. I lived in central Phoenix and waited tables at an all-night diner with a buzzing pie sign. That Saturday, midnight, I walked home in black jeans and a blue t-shirt, shoulder-length red hair, 140 pounds. The streets were empty, which was normal on weekends in my area. I'd gotten used to walking at night. I kept my head up, no headphones, and watched corners, alleys, parked cars. In all my years there, nothing serious happened to me. I figured staying alert would keep me safe. 20 minutes if the crosswalks cooperated, a little longer if they didn't. I passed a nail salon with sun-faded posters, a laundromat with a humming machine, and a liquor store with bars welded over the glass. A window upstairs dripped onto the sidewalk. A dog barked behind a gate. quiet. My shadow broke and reformed under the orange streetlights. The asphalt held the day's heat. Fryer oil clung to my clothes from work, a smell I barely noticed anymore. A bus rattled by empty, driver hunched over wheel. I crossed early when it looked safe and kept a steady pace. The neighborhood looked in between. Not nice, not bad, tired. Small houses with desert yards, few saguaros, then stretches of bare dirt. One porch light flickered, another burned steady. A flag clacked at the schoolyard, then fell quiet. A furniture store sat behind glass, couches like dark shapes against wall. I didn't plan to stop anywhere. The grocery by my place closed at 10. My building sat behind it, beige stucco, metal stair that rang if you ran. I pictured door in the peephole. I kept hands free, phone in my pocket, and counted intersections. 3, then 2. Feet sore but manageable. A cyclist came up behind without lights, passed and didn't look back. The smell of hot rubber followed him and faded. A fast food cup scraped along the curb like it was alive. A palm frond dropped behind a wall, sound bouncing. I checked parked cars. Nothing. A Spanish ball game murmured. The city fell asleep. I moved like a regular, not sneaking, not slow. I crossed a wide road with a median when the red hand flashed the last few seconds. Tires hissed far off on freeway. The air tasted like dust and oil. I liked the rhythm. Look, listen, move. I adjusted my shirt and tightened the jacket knot around my waist. I thought about coffee refills, split checks, and the guy who sent back his eggs twice and tipped $2. I kept scanning windows for reflections, stayed off the curb, and walked straight through the gaps between lamps. About 10 minutes from home, I left the wider road and the sidewalk narrowed. A dark pickup eased into view behind me. Not close, just slow, matching my pace. In area, men sometimes rolled up to offer rides, flirt, or ask directions. It wasn't unusual. I watched it in glass. At the next crosswalk, I crossed to the other side. That usually solved pushy drivers fast. The pickup kept rolling second, then turned down a side street and disappeared around a corner. I listened for it and heard only even hum of the night. I kept walking, pace, eyes forward. I took the next block and checked back again. Nothing. I figured the driver had been looking for an address or killing time. The road straightened toward place. The last stretch had fewer driveways and bigger gaps between lamps. I pictured my stair, door, the deadbolt, and I sped up. Sweat gathered at the base of my neck where my hair touched skin. I adjusted grip on nothing and kept my hands free. Streetlights ahead looked farther apart than they were. I kept to the edge of sidewalk, away from driveways. I told myself to walk, not run, and breathe. Within a minute, the truck was back. It came from ahead time, like it had looped the block and timed it. The engine idled low as it angled toward the curb and rolled to a stop so the front tire kissed the gutter. I slowed and stayed on the edge. The cab sat high enough that I had to tip my chin to see in. The passenger window was half open. Music didn't play. The lights stayed off. I kept moving but slower, my shoulder brushing the cinder block wall. I turned my head enough to look without turning my back. Two silhouettes in the cab resolved into faces as my eyes adjusted. The driver gripped the wheel at 10 and 2. The passenger leaned an elbow on the door. I could see forearms, short sleeves, haircuts. Nothing sloppy. No one spoke. The engine's low idle filled the space between us. I stayed in the cone of the streetlight so I could see them, and they could see me. My steps slowed but kept rhythm. I angled my body to give space without stepping into the street. Hands were visible at my sides. I didn't say anything. I didn't break stride. Through the half-open window, I could see the driver's face enough to read his focus. He stared forward, then flicked his eyes toward me and back. The passenger's jaw was tight. Their expressions were serious, not lazy or drunk. The truck's paint looked dull, dark, like it hadn't been washed. No one leaned out. No one waved or called. The passenger rested his forearm on the door and watched me through the gap. I took 3 more steps, and the front tire creaked against the gutter again, a push like a reminder. I kept to the wall and matched breathing. Through the half-open window, the cab was clear enough. 2 men sat there, one driving and one in the passenger seat. I looked long enough to register faces and kept to my side. Both looked like Latino guys in their mid-30s with short haircuts and serious expressions on their faces. Their eyes stayed on me, and it made my skin tighten. But I wasn't scared yet. Men tried things like this where I lived. I kept my pace and said, "Not interested," flat and loud. I crossed at the next opening, shoes scraping the curb, and took the opposite sidewalk. The truck rolled forward, then slowed like it was testing me. When I switched sides, they switched too, drifting along the gutter. They pulled up and hovered. No music, no smiles tonight. They kept pace along the curb. I kept my route straight and steady. I kept my hands free and checked doorways, cars, alleys. The truck idled beside me again while the passenger leaned his elbow like he had time. I cut across another side street to make space. They nosed ahead and parked up the block like they wanted me to close the distance. The driver stared through me. The passenger tracked each step. Their behavior slid from casual to focused. I turned and shouted, "Leave me alone!" The truck lurched forward a few feet, then braked. I faced front and moved. The next corner came and I took it, fast, but not running. For a few minutes, the pickup disappeared. The road went quiet again. I watched the cross streets and listened. I kept walking toward my building. I put my phone in my palm just in case. I unlocked the screen and brought up my roommate's contact. My thumb hovered over call. The grocery lot sat dark, only the soda machine glowing. I looked both ways before crossing the driveway. That was when the low growl of an engine grew. It came from behind and got louder fast. The sound bounced off the walls, deep and close. Headlights slid along the cinder block. I pivoted right to keep sightlines clear and stepped out of the center of the sidewalk. The pickup stopped hard at the curb with a dip in the nose. The passenger door flew open before the engine settled. The man jumped out and came straight at me, fast, eyes flat. His face didn't change. He moved like he had a job to do and little time. At the same time, the rear door on the cab swung open. Crew cab. Inside looked dark and empty. I knew they meant to pull me in, slam the doors, and vanish. The street was dead. No cars, no people. He closed distance with long steps, hands out, fingers wide. I slid along the wall and kept him in front of me. The rear door hung open, waiting. He got within a few steps. His arms opened wider, ready to wrap and lift. My brain flicked through options and rejected most. There was nowhere good to run. I needed noise and risk for them. I raised my phone and pointed straight at his face. "You're being recorded on live video," my voice carried. "My boyfriend can see your license plate through the stream, and police are already on their way." I kept the phone up and squared my shoulders, angling so the truck and the plate filled the frame. The lie came out clean. I turned the phone like I was giving a better angle. The screen showed only the camera app, but my arm stayed firm. I tapped my thumb like I was pinning his face. He froze mid-step. His mouth tightened, then his eyes hardened. He looked at me, then at the truck, then down the empty street. He listened. Nothing out there but the engine and a distant dog. He measured, head tilting like he was weighing it. The open rear door waited. The driver's hands pressed the wheel. No one spoke. I held my angle and kept the phone chest high. I breathed even and didn't fill the silence. I let him picture a patrol car turning the corner with lights. Seconds stretched. He bit his lip once, then turned on his heel and rushed back to the pickup. The rear door shut with a heavy thud. He dove into the passenger seat and yanked it closed. The driver punched the gas. The tires squealed. Rubber streaked the asphalt. The truck shot forward and cleared the block, taillights shrinking, then took the corner sharp. The sound dropped out, returned further away, then went quiet. I stood on the sidewalk and listened. I didn't move for a slow count. I lowered the phone and checked the camera as if it mattered. Nothing had recorded. The street was still empty. I walked backward a few steps. Then I turned and headed for my building. I stayed close to the wall and crossed the last intersection when it was clear. I checked behind me every few steps. I reached the metal stair, then stopped and listened again before climbing. I unlocked the door, went in, and locked it twice. I set a chair under the knob and sat on the floor with my back against it. My phone screen glowed. I typed a message to my roommate, deleted it, and typed again, shorter. After a while, I checked the peephole and checked it again. I was 30 when I wrote this, remembering that Saturday night in Central Phoenix when I was 26. A split-second lie held because I sold it with detail. It broke my idea of normal. I changed how I walk and plan. I don't blame the street or the hour. They picked a quiet stretch and a gap in traffic and tried a quick grab. That night proved the risk was real even when nothing looks wrong. 4 years later, I still think about that night and the way those taillights bent around the corner. I watch curbs and windows and listen for engines that don't fit. I keep my phone charged and change routes, and don't assume a street is empty just because it looks calm. That experience shattered any illusion of safety I had and changed how I approach personal security forever.